I see it is 8 o'clock. I know that we are missing the treasurer, but we do have a quorum. If
Sure.
you want to proceed, we have the secretary online, the auditor, and the superintendent. I'm sure.
Yeah,
the treasurer-
Mr. Chairman, can I just test my audio?
Can you hear us, Secretary?
Yeah, is my audio okay?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Today, the order of proceedings will be, we'll start in your capacity as the State Loan and Investment Board to hear from the Wyoming Business Council. Then we'll resolve into the State Board of Land Commissioners, and then come back as the State Loan and Investment Board, then Board of Deposits, and then consider state investment matters. So, Mr. Chairman, as you're going to start in your capacity as the State Loan and Investment Board, I'll turn it over to Director Durrell from the Wyoming Business Council, and he can take you through his matters.
Good morning, Director, and I see that the treasurer is joining us as we speak, so we have a full quorum.
Good morning, Governor. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for hearing our piece this morning. We have one project before you. As the interim director mentioned, my name is Josh Durrell. I'm the CEO of the Wyoming Business Council. And our first order of business is to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. So I believe you all have copies of that. If there are any changes, please let us know. But otherwise, if you could please take a look at those and approve them, we'd appreciate that.
Yeah, so members, you've had a chance to review the minutes. Are there changes or clarifications? Any comments? If there are none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the minutes as proposed.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And now I'm going to turn it over to Miss Noelle Reed, who will be walking through the Business Ready Communities project for the town of Guernsey. And any questions for that can be peppered in as they come, or we can wait till the end. She'll be taking that over now. Miss Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Noelle Reed. I am the Grants Portfolio Manager for the Wyoming Business Council. There is one community project application before you today at a request of $750,000. There's approximately $76 million in the BRC account currently. The town of Guernsey is requesting a $750,000 community project grant to add 2,500 square feet of space to the Guernsey Senior Center and the Guernsey Public Library. The recommendation before you today is do not fund. The additional space that they are requesting funds for will enable the community to provide additional services in the areas of public health, mental health, veteran services, and public meeting space. Furthermore, this project has the potential to create a space for job training, job exploration, and entrepreneurial endeavors. This facility not only serves members of the Guernsey community, but also neighboring towns of Hartville, Wendover, and Lingle. The Senior Center currently has limited space for existing public health services, and these services are often in a reading room located off the library that is not always private. The scope of the project would include more space for the Senior Center, as well as a conference room in the library that would be equipped with technology to foster job exploration and job training opportunities. The community plans to keep some of the historical components of the building, adding a covered entrance for loading and unloading patrons, as well as 2 new ADA compliant restrooms. Here is a rendering of what they want the facility to look like. The light colored is what their current facility is. And up here, they would be the technology room with some of those computers. This would be the new office space, and then this would be the expansion that they would add on. There are several partners committed to this project, including the Platte County School District 2, the Guernsey Economic and Tourism Development Corporation, and the Veterans Commission. The school district and the Veterans Commission have both indicated they would use the facility for counseling services. John Bunning Transport has also indicated this project would be useful to them with workforce training and skills development as they expand their operations in Guernsey. And you can find letters of support for this project within your board materials. The community has also committed to a match that is 29% higher than what is required. This is coming from the land, or from the town, as well as the Guernsey Economic and Tourism Development Corporation. There is potential for, some potential to increase entrepreneurial activity in the area. The community has spoken with Eastern Wyoming College on the potential to offer non-credit and credit classes in Guernsey for entrepreneurs. Finally, this project would allow for increased and improved access to mental health services, veteran services, counseling services, as well as potential for after-school programs in the future. However, we feel that this project does not align with the Wyoming Business Council's current strategic direction of solving barriers to economic growth. We also looked at the tax structure that the town of Guernsey has. They have the 4% state sales tax. They also have their local general purpose option at 1% that goes to the county. The county also has a specific purpose option at 1%, so they have 6% currently. We did a little bit of research through the Department of Revenue and found that 1% in Guernsey realizes a little bit shy of $500,000. They do have other options for taxes, such as the economic development tax and the municipal specific purpose tax are also potential options that they could pursue. When we looked at this project, we looked at both compelling and concerning items. So some of the compelling items for this project is that the local match percentage is higher than what is required. They do have several partnerships that have been established, and there is support from the community. And the community is willing and eager to build their capacity regarding entrepreneurship opportunities. However, the community is still developing those ecosystem tools, resources, and services. The project does have low potential to attract business or workforce. And while the desirability of a community, while the desirability of living in a community can be a barrier to economic growth, there is little evidence that it is the barrier to growth in Guernsey. Because of that, this project does not align with our current investment strategy. So the recommendation before you today is do not fund. And I would like to pass it back to Director Durrell to see if he has any other comments he would like to make. Thank you.
Director.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of things to remember. I think it's important to remember that the Business Council has been asked over the last few years to really make some hard decisions and really look at the projects that we see and look at them through the lens of return on investment to the state. And so as a result of that analysis, what we've begun to do is say no to projects that don't necessarily have an economic return. And we've also really focused in on projects that create great jobs for Wyomingites now and into the future. And we've also looked at infrastructure projects that unlock economic growth. You've seen those projects. Those projects are things that can make a difference in our communities and help them grow. However, the return on investment is great on an individual project, and it's a way for us to make sure that we're at least looking at the best projects possible and pushing our communities to continue to do that. But the real question I have is, why do we have to work on projects that are community enhancements? Why, as a state, are we asked to fund something that is a benefit and a good project for a community, but the community seems to or feels as if they have no way to do it on their own? Well, we have a program. It's a holdover from yesteryear, perhaps, when we would do maybe 50 projects in a year and we would have quite a large budget. And we were able to do a lot of projects in a lot of communities and pay nearly 100% for those. But those days are gone. In fact, Ms. Reed mentioned that we have $74 million in BRC today. There's also an amendment to take about 20% of that sitting in the budget bill right now. That may occur. And so really, do we have 74 million? We don't. I think we have less. And I think that the signal that is being sent is that that may go down even more in coming years. So the question I have is, what can the community do to be self-reliant. And when I took this role, I thought that it would be about finding ROI and making projects that make good business sense, and that's true. However, what I found is that that's not the actual problem. The actual problem is that there's lack of self-reliance at a community level. And the word can't do it without state funds is much more prevalent than I thought it would be. And I think we have an opportunity to remove the idea of can't and bring about community self-reliance. We've seen that happen. There are two projects I want to highlight where the Wyoming Business Council board said no, and this board agreed and said no as well. And those communities didn't walk away and say, golly, we're never going to be able to do this. Instead, they walked away and they got the projects done on their own. And in doing so, they developed the know-how to get projects done. They developed the team that can continue to solve problems in their community. The thing that will make them resilient into the future is not the money. The thing that will make them resilient into the future is know-how. And that can only be done when a challenge is upon them. They have to rally together to get that challenge taken care of, and they build those muscles so that they can solve more problems, because more problems are going to come for all of our communities. That's how it works. All communities face challenges, and we want to equip them to face those in the best way possible. And we feel like self-reliance is likely going to help them in not just 2025, but in 2030 and 40 and 50 and on down. And I think we have an obligation and an opportunity to do that today by helping them see that they do have tools. The municipal specific purpose was granted by the legislature so that they could pay their own way, so that their populace could say, we love this project so much that we're going to pay an extra penny for it, and we're going to get it done. And in this case, in a little over a year and a half, they'd have the money to do that. So I think it really comes down to not the $750,000, but the hope that the word no can bring to a community in the long run. And I think there's an opportunity to do that. And again, there's no such thing as a bad project. It's just, does it fit with what we're supposed to do at the Wyoming Business Council? So thank you for listening to Ms. Reed's presentation and seeing that information and listening to my approach to where we're trying to go at our local level. And thank you for your consideration today.
Thank you, Director. Are there questions? Mr. Treasurer.
You know, there were a few things that I didn't, or I guess I neglected or didn't think about when we were doing our presentation from you guys. And I'm just curious, we've had some other ones that we have funded. Can you kind of run over those recent ones? And I'll say that, you know, when we switch, I guess, the directions of and the priorities, it would be nice to have something that we might be able to have perhaps an intermediary step. And so maybe a question about what's the possibility or whether you could have rules that would say that economic development tax, that if it wasn't implemented, it would have to be implemented to provide a percentage of the project. But I don't know whether or not it's under your power to actually put those types of restrictions in without statutory authority.
Mr. Chairman and Treasurer Meyer, that's a really good question. We do have flexibility in rulemaking. We can develop rules to put standards upon the BRC program to make sure that the investments that we're making are sort of hedged maybe against a way to pay that back or kind of try to take what we have to get what we want, which is that self-reliance. So it's possible. I think that's something that we will be exploring and utilizing our rulemaking authority to do that, because I think that's a fair point, is how do we encourage communities to build that capacity on their own? I think there are some other ways to utilize our rulemaking to make sure that projects like this could get done at a local level rather than here. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, a follow-up?
Yep.
And that, maybe rather than grants, we could look at more of a loan program that would be paid back by the economic development tax. That, to me, I think makes sense in that regard, and have it either a cap of 500,000 or something, or the percentage of the project. So, and the reason I say that is that as we get into I guess an uncertain tax structure for the local communities and political subdivisions, that if we could have some kind of a program that wasn't I guess central to your mission, but maybe it would be able to I guess help in certain regards to some of the displacement of potential, because they're going to be looking at not defunding their police departments and their fire departments, rather than some of these what we call soft projects. And the soft projects in this thing here, I told you I got a soft spot for seniors and libraries, and from my time on the Labor, Health, and Social Services Committee, we had a really good presentation at that time about the percentage of people that needed mental health in all of the different counties. So, and COVID even exacerbated that, and so there's going to be a lot of things that and one of the things you got to have a community that has good mental health and physical health to even get that entrepreneur spirit and move forward. So just maybe the question about maybe making it a loan program rather than a grant program, but I think those things need to be, I guess, put forward so people understand that the battlefield has changed and this is where you're at in the future. I think communications and information, I think, is really important. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Madam Auditor.
Thanks. In the community enhancement program that, again, we're all realizing may not be much, while we all love it, it's not much ROI. How many, apart from the project presented to us today, are there a lot of applications in the hopper for that?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Auditor, no, there are not. We see these projects once a year.
Oh, great.
So
Okay.
so we only see them once a year, and this was the only applicant for that. So it's not a program that's oft used.
Okay.
Partially because we sent a really strong signal in March of 2020 that we're not going to be doing those things, and that signal was received by a lot of folks. I think a lot of projects probably got pulled back.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that's we don't see a lot of applicants for this.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
Okay, Secretary Gray.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Durrell, we talked a little bit about this in our briefing. I wanted to follow up a little bit on the treasurer's comments, which maybe didn't yield a colloquy with you in a question, but I think the treasurer made a lot of good points. And, how can we, one, communicate and maybe make this clearer in statute, maybe rule, and then also set up some sort of arrangement where we can do these sorts of things in the future, as the treasurer was saying, maybe in some sort of loan arrangement with the state, with a local sort of option that has been voted on that is going to fund that. I know you've thought a little about that, but I just think that, I want to hear from you on it.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, yes, that is something that we've thought about. I think we've been utilizing what I'll call incentive and disincentive as the motivators for that, and that is the the fact that it's a very challenging thing to go to our board and get denied, and then to come to this board and in some cases get denied, and in other cases it moves forward. We've been utilizing really just the power of the board recommendation and staff recommendation to do that. And of course, during the process of developing the application, we're very straight with communities and talk about what is likely going to work or not. I think that the next step is to maybe have a little bit more teeth in rule and utilize that mechanism to make it a little bit more clear what we consider a project that the Wyoming Business Council should consider. Again, as you all have mentioned, there's really no bad project. These projects meet needs at a community level. It's just really a matter of, is that the right place for the Business Council to play? And so I think what we are going to continue to look at is how do we continue to utilize stronger and stronger mechanisms to make it so that we maybe don't even see these types of projects, that there are other mechanisms for those. And again, we want to be part of that solution, because our job is not just to do projects in the state. Our job is actually to help communities learn how to solve their own problems and use all of the tools at their disposal. And so we would have a role in a project like this, even if we weren't the funder, because we really do believe that our role is to build that community resilience and show communities the mechanisms, the know-how, the policies that they can use to get this done. And I think that that's going to be a role that the Business Council always plays, because ultimately we call ourselves the Business Council, but what we really are is we're trying to build community resilience. And I think that that's a role we're always going to play, just whether we use money for that or not. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Secretary.
Please, Mr. Secretary, if you got a follow-up.
Yeah, well, I would just like to say, I know we talked about this, but I think we need to kind of, the two projects last year, and I think now we need to take this to the finish line and thinking about both things. One, how we make it clearer in rule, and then I think also in statute. I think there's a lot of appetite to make this clear, but then also what the options are for these projects. The community believes in this project, and it's a good project. Like you said, we all agree with that. But then the second thing is, what are the options? And I know that's maybe more of a broader conversation for the board, but I appreciate what you said, that the Business Council wants to engage in that. No question there. I just,
Right.
just wanted to follow up a little bit. Thanks.
Thank you. Director, I just want to compliment you. The Business Council came about because when we passed Amendment 4 at a dark, dark time in Wyoming's economic history, the idea was we would have funds that would help businesses come to Wyoming and thrive and build. That didn't go very well. I think, Gill Windows is maybe one example of the success out of a bunch that never did. And so we put together the Business Council, and Foster Fries's wife actually served on that first commission, and they were supposed to bring expertise. And then, if you remember, Mr. Treasurer, they also brought in Cheyenne Capital, which was to help, folks build business plans, et cetera. And over time, it's kind of wobbled from that mission to, community enhancements. And I remember one former board member saying, we just need to sprinkle fairy dust around the state. And that doesn't really result in economic development. So I think it's important that we really drive to what the essential mission is, because you say resources are getting slimmer. To the point about what are the resources are there, the Wyoming Grants Management Office, there's an opportunity scan I have here that goes over several potential programs. And I think, as Wyoming is tightening its belt, probably state assets, they always want to be first because we're much easier to deal with. But to some degree, they ought to be last assets in. And I don't have a problem necessarily with the loan pieces of it. And we've certainly dealt with that with some roads and other things that have been considered in other programs. But I do have a listing here of all the other resources that are available. I just wanted to make those points. I guess I'm reconfirming, I think you're doing the right thing, and it is tough.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sure our regional director and the community would love to learn more about that opportunity scan and be able to approach other mechanisms to pay for things. So thank you.
And so what I hear is that your staff can actually help with the community, and the Grants Management Office was sort of stood up to help with that as well.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay. Well, we should hear from the community if there's anybody here. Yep. Please.
Chairman and board members, my name is Bruce Heimlich. I work with the town of Guernsey, lived there for 36 years and have a soft spot, as you said, for that. The community grant program does offer a unique opportunity to address critical needs in Guernsey, both for our community and for the broader region, while advancing our economic development goals. With a commitment of $486,000, we have far exceeded the match. So we have used as much as we could for local at this point. And a point that I'd like to make is we visited with our regional, we visited with staff, and we were told that this was a good opportunity for us to use. Now it's being changed a little bit, so we feel like we're kind of swimming upstream and the rules have changed a little bit. Because why did we not try and find other sources? Because this source was available and it was in the rules and regs and could be applied as we asked for it to be applied. So that's why we're here. We're expanding in an existing building because that's the cheapest way to do things. And we have some critical services that we offer there, but we offer them in a pretty rudimentary state. And so we're hoping to do that. We do have Camp Guernsey there. We do have our share of veterans in the area. The Wyoming Veterans Commission does do counseling there for those veterans, so that's important. Also, we do quite a bit of mental health counseling in that. Right now in a room that has 3 doors in it. When you have 3 doors in a room, you're not very private. The other thing is we have talked with the superintendent of schools there, and there are times that they need more counseling. They have space at school, and this could also be available for them. Plus, it would be off-site of school, could be used for family counseling and some things like that that would be much better for them. And we also are looking at the idea of definitely improving the bathroom situation. We have some patrons that do not come to the center because the bathrooms do not work for them, in the sense that there's no mobility ability for them to use that. So the idea of the entrepreneurial space, as we've grown and we first had our recommendation not to fund, we went back and looked at it again. EWC wants to be a player. John Bunning currently has almost all of our industrial park. They have 49 acres of pipe on the ground, and it looks like things are going to continue to grow for them. They continue to need CDL drivers, and our school district does use the RIDE program that we create. We've done one class already, and we're in the middle of another one. And John Bunny has indicated that they would use those people and hire them. So that does address our economic stability down the road to make sure that John Bunny can not only stay there, but can grow. And CDL drivers are available to all other businesses that would need that. The kids that come out at 18 or 19 with a CDL sometimes are caught in the sense they can't drive until they're 21. But John Bunny said, we'll hire them in the yard, put them to work and start that experience. And so as soon as they can drive for us, we can let them drive. So we do have that opportunity to do that. So I'll end up, I had all the notes, but Noel did quite a good job as far as seeing them. But I do want to point out that we, in good faith, applied for a grant that was there that did meet these needs. We have the needs in the community to make this better. We have invested what we could at this point. And times are going to get tougher, towns and communities, we know that, towns and cities. But by investing in Guernsey now, you're not just funding a community project. You're ensuring the growth and sustainability of our workforce, enhancing access to essential services, and improving the quality of life for all of our citizens. We believe this investment will have a lasting impact, creating a ripple effect that strengthens our community and its future. So I would thank you for considering this grant, even with all that we talked about before.
Well, thank you, sir. And have you had, I'll be glad to deliver this to you because it has a listing of other sources, which I think you can avail yourself of regardless of whether this board approves or not.
Yeah, well, and once again, always you want to have as many resources as you possibly can. At this point, we use the resources that were appropriate. But down the road, if there's other things we need to do, that would definitely be a way to go.
Well, there are senior services, there are HH&S services, rural development there, and our Grants Management Office was set up to help communities be able to access craft, because not every community has the ability to write the grants. And I think you heard from the Business Council a willingness to help participate in that
I do
effort as
understand
well.
that. But you do understand why we presented the project as we do, because we were told it was a good project and it did fit the parameters of the program.
I do, and you know, last year we funded 2 projects, which reminded me, I actually would love to sort of understand how they're performing. One in Barnum and one in Meeteetse on this similar program, for the same reasons. I mean, yeah, they're valid reasons.
And I will say that the town of Guernsey has benefited from the Wyoming Business Council in my time that I worked with the community there. And all of the grants that we had came in on time and under budget or on budget.
Yeah.
So I will tell you that that's what's going to happen this time too if we fund it.
Excellent,
Thank you.
excellent. Thanks. Mr. Treasurer.
Would a loan be helpful in your case there that you'd have to pay back in, say, 3 years?
The mayor's here, and I'm not going to speak for the mayor or
Not
the
gonna speak
community
for the mayor,
in
okay.
that regard. We'd have to look at our resources, but you know that resources are going to change in the next year, we think. And
That's,
so
I know,
to
yeah.
commit them to something that they may not be able to come out from under, I can't do that. I'm here to make a case for the grant project that was made with the program that was made and the understanding it would be a good project.
Okay.
And I think it does have benefit for a lot
I
of
guess a
people.
follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Treasurer.
How did you learn about this particular loan program or grant program? Was it advertised? Was it on the Business Council's website or?
I got a call from the mayor and he said, would you look at writing a grant? We need to get these things done. I said, Mr. Mayor, do you have any money? I said, when you have money, then we'll talk about it. And so we talked to the regional director. The regional director said, here's a program. It looks like it would fit this. And so we went forward at that time. We were not told that we didn't have economic indicators in the matter that they wanted. We do think that if we can continue to supply a workforce for John Bunning and keep them in our community, that we will be meeting the economic pieces of that and continuing a very, very good situation.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, the regional director, was that a regional director for the Business Council?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, anything you want to?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Board, I would like to add that we would look at paying back money for this grant, but we're paying back for our landfill that we had to get done. We have to pay back that loan. Also, we're doing our water transmission project now that we would have had money with to do this project, but we had to put in a water tank. We have a water tank, and it cost us $1 million. We had to have money for that. And also the water transmission that we usually expending money for, or we would have had money to do this. And this has been sitting for years prior to when I was a mayor, and when I come back, I thought we better get it done while we can. And we asked Drew, and he said, it'll work. So that's the reason we come
Yeah,
with the project, so.
thank you. And for the record, your name too.
Ed Delgado.
Yeah, thank you. Questions? Comments? Well, really appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
And I guess,
Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. I do have one question for Mr. Durrell there, and I understand, I don't want to get into a cross, everyone's memories, but Mr. Durrell, I do recall in the Meeteetse Bar None case that they also said that they were told that, that this was an appropriate program. And so I just think that underscores the need. And I know that you're doing things to make this clear, but to continue to make it clearer. And I think, I think it's really time for us to clarify this in rule and statute if this is the true direction that we've decided to go.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, please.
I would make one comment because I do believe in the project to the point that when they asked me to write the grant, I said I will, but you have to pay me. So I charged the town of Guernsey $1 to write the grant because I do believe in what it would do for the citizens in that community.
Thank you.
And I might have to give it back.
Not necessarily, because I've got, 7 pages here. So, Director. Any response?
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Secretary and members of the board, I think all of the commentary and that also brought by the community, I think it's very valuable. It helps us understand what our next moves need to be. I think it's really pretty clear to me and definitely to my team, as well as probably other members of the state, what needs to happen next. And so we'll utilize every avenue we can, which essentially is rulemaking authority, to make it very, very clear what is not just eligible, but I think there's another level of discernment that people need to realize, is that we're not checking boxes. We're not going to become an ATM that when you check the boxes, money comes out ever. Because I think that's why we were designed to have a board of directors. That's why we were designed to be a quasi-agency, is so that we could move at the speed of business and move at the speed of problem solving that our communities require. And so we will continue to utilize discernment, even though projects may check all the boxes for eligibility. That does not mean that it will pass muster in the discernment. I think that is something that we will always have, and it will not be in rule. It will always be in the hands of our board and the hands of discernment by leaders like you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I think actually everyone has said the same thing here in slightly different manners, even though being from different entities. And I think we all recognize the challenge that WBC has, for the last 5 years or so, really had a new standard by which we're judging things to make sure that we meet the expectations of the legislature and the public, because they have been under the microscope and been criticized for picking winners and losers. And so that these projects need to cash out for the state. That being said, I think we all recognize that this was a little bit of a vestigial organ pot of funding that is out there. And if it's out there, people are going to apply for it. And it's hard to say, well, we have this program out there, this community enhancement program, but essentially nothing's going to qualify for it because this no longer really aligns with our primary goals, even though they're good projects. So my motion, Mr. Chairman, is going to be approve funding for Guernsey with the strongest, with a contingency, or not with a contingency, but with a recommendation to the Business Council, recognizing that we do not write their rules, we do not have that power, but that the community enhancement program be eliminated and those projects are rolled into the main pot of money to where they have to meet similar standards as to the other projects that we review. And that was real messy, but and so I'm open to tweaking that. But my point would be for this board to very strongly say, let's make sure we get those rules changed, clarified, so that the communities aren't coming to either this board or to the Business Council and saying, well, what do you mean? I've checked the boxes, which we would all do. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my motion.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Mr. Treasurer.
So I want to be sure that that's a rule. You can do that in rules and there's no statutory direction for you to do this program. Otherwise, you've got a rule that is not intended for the statute, within the intentions of the statute.
I see Mr. Peters' approach. So Mr. Durrell, Director Durrell, go ahead first.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Treasurer, I can answer that this is in rule today. We can change those and go through the rulemaking process in order to update them and remove reference to the community enhancement grants. So,
Yeah, and
that can
Mr.
be done.
Chairman, I'd say communicate with all of your regional directors that this thing's a Gone Johnson, okay? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Secretary or Treasurer, thank you for that bit of advice. I appreciate that.
Don Johnson.
Director and Mr. Peters may have a better notion of this. I'm thinking the motion ought to be probably split, simply because I think one is saying fund and the other is saying rule making. And I'm not clear that we have the authority to direct the business council to do rules. I think and so Mr. Peters.
Mr. Chairman, I think the board could certainly give some direction, but ultimately it will be up to the business council at how they want to handle rulemaking.
Okay. Is that,
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to split the motion, but that's why I said recognizing that we don't make the rules.
Yeah.
We're not the boss of them.
yeah,
But if we make that statement and nothing changes, then the next project that comes before us,
Right.
we're.
Mr. Chairman,
Madam Superintendent.
if feasible to have it in one motion, that would be my preference, simply because that impacts the vote on the project and direction moving forward, I think.
Okay. Okay, well, it stays there. My request is that we routinely turn back millions of dollars of rural development funding that goes to other states, simply because the challenge of getting that done. And our part is going to shrink. And, I think about the business park that we built in Thermopolis, for example, that sat idle for a decade or better until, somebody bought it at a bargain basement price and then put a museum there, which is great, but not all the infrastructure ever got used. In fact, a lot of it just languished. And so, I would like to understand what the return on investment, because these are dollars that were passed by the voters of Wyoming for economic development specifically. Anyway, there we are. We have the motion. Any further comment? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays?
Aye.
That motion is a 3-2. So, thank you. Me. I am the other no. Mr. You were an aye or you're a nay?
I was an aye.
Okay, I'm then one no. Thank you. And I want to provide you with this list, and please come forward.
I just want to say thank you for that support. It'll make a difference to the citizens in our community, so we appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I do want you to know that the business park that you invested in Guernsey only has 2 lots left out of 28, so it's
No,
not
I know,
sitting
that's
idle.
work. But I just think when we put this money out,
Yes.
we need to know how it's being used. We have a community center in Bar None. And we also have a place in Matiti, and I don't know what their performance has been in terms of the benefits that I know the alleged benefits. I don't know if they're getting used that way.
There's a lot of alleged stuff going on.
Yeah, and I'm
Thank
happy
you
to.
very much.
And if you want this is great, because I think that could help be useful for enhancements. Yep, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hate to repeat what's been said, but I haven't really made a comment, but I would, just agree with a lot of the comments made that we have to move away from the nice to have community enhancements. We cannot fund those any longer in this way, and we have to focus on that return. And I sincerely appreciate the direction that the Business Council is moving. I agree with it wholeheartedly. I think we find ourselves in a position where the rules of the game have been set and communities have applied for that. And so do appreciate the direction we're moving, and anything that we can do to help with those changes in your rules, stand at the ready.
Mr. Chairman and Madam Superintendent, thanks for those comments. And really the entire board, I appreciate the help, because what you were able to do today is you got a twofer. Everybody won today. The community won and got what they need to do to move forward, at least in the short run. I think the message is really, really clear now. And the support that you give, even though you're not the boss of us, I like that comment, but you are leaders and your voices carry weight. And when you make a recommendation like that, it does make our job easier to make those rule changes, which may not be that palatable to a lot of communities. And so for that, I do thank you all, because that is important to us to be able to carry that change forward. And so thank you for your effort today, and thank you for your consideration. And I thank you for your stewardship of the future of these communities. So thank you. I think a lot of good was done today. Thank you.
All right,
Mr. Chairman.
thank you. Mr. Treasurer.
And I guess when you're having those conversations about, eliminating it or to me, I think a loan replacement and the interest rate being, the rate of inflation, and probably only a 2-year loan, that might be just like a short bridge loan. You wouldn't lose your purchasing power. Money would be coming back relatively soon. Then that would allow some extra time to go fishing in the right hole, I guess. And then, basically, still have some I guess, landing strip for some of these folks. But, I'd say 500,000 max, and then put a cap on the whole program that maybe it's only $1 million, in a biennium. So then, if you have those restrictions, I think you will be the last place they look. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to clarify the vote total. I know there's a little bit of delay, and I voted aye. Was it 4-1 or 3-2?
I think it was 4-1.
Okay, thank you.
That was a sole no vote. Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, it would now be appropriate to pause the State Loan Investment Board and convene as the State Board of Land Commissioners.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, today's State Board of Land Commissioners meeting has been properly noticed as a regular meeting. The first item on the agenda is consideration of the December 5th, 2024 regular meeting minutes.
Okay, Director, I think we have a quorum, and you can, or Interim Director, you can proceed.
First item on the agenda is consideration of the December 5th, 2024 regular meeting minutes.
Members, you've had a chance to review the minutes. Are there corrections, comments, clarifications? If there are none, I'd entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the December 5th, 2024 SBC meeting, or sorry, BLC meetings, minutes.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, we have provided the board with the usual reports behind tab B. I would also note the addition of the report under B5, which is the Director's Consideration and Action Report. As you recall, and pursuant to Wyoming Statute 36.3.102C and the Director's Approval Policy approved by the board at its December 5th, 2024 meeting, the board directed that certain actions be taken by the Director. Those actions were to consider lease assignments, sublease agreements, contracts concerning the leased area, surface damage payments, applications to construct improvements, except those that would restrict existing public access, timber sale auctions, de minimis acreage adjustments, suspension of operations, and unit and communitization agreements. Mr. Chairman, the Director's Consideration and Action Report details all of the applications and actions taken since the board's last meeting on December 5th, 2024. The Director's approval or denial of the applications on the report is considered final unless the board wishes to override a decision made by the Director by taking the matter off of the report and taking a different action other than what the Director's decision was. Mr. Chairman, Additionally, an applicant or any party that is impacted by the director's decision may request the board consider overriding the director's decision. At this time, we have not been notified of anybody wishing to discuss any of these applications with the board. I'd also note that I had a conflict on a sublease agreement that was for lease 1-7660. Mr. Cody Booth, our Assistant Director for the Trust Land Management Division, handled that sublease agreement and did approve it pursuant to the board's policy. So with that, we don't have anything else to add at this time on any of the reports and would stand for any questions.
Are there questions? Mr. Booth, I have one, noting that in the oil and gas and uranium lease assignment, just curious if you're seeing any new activity or an increase in activity in either oil and gas or the uranium lease issues.
Mr. Chairman, we did see a bump in our November oil and gas lease auction. We issued 112 leases, which is a high number for what we see in the last several auctions. So we do see an increase there. And then you'll see on our uranium board matter on this board meeting that there are several additional uranium leases. It's quite an expansive list. So we do see a little bump in that as well.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to note that we removed two matters from today's agenda. Those matters are Board Matter E5, which is a special use lease application for SU 1123, and Board Matter E9, which is a wind energy lease application for WL 1620. Also noting that we have provided the materials for this meeting in advance and have briefed each of you individually prior to the meeting. At this time, I'm prepared to propose a consent list if the board would like.
Please, if hearing no objection.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the following matters are amenable for treatment on a consent list. That would be board matters E1 through E4, E6 through E8, F1 through F4, G1 through G7, H1, and H2.
Members of the board, what's your pleasure on proposing a consent list of E1 through E4, E6 through E8, F1 through F4, G1 through G7, H1, and H2?
Mr. Chairman, I would move a consent list as separated.
Thank you.
Second.
It's been
Mr.
moved.
Chairman, I'd like to remove G1 and G6.
E1 and E6 are removed.
No, G1 is in Gary and G6 is in Gary.
B.
G.
G. Okay. 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 G1 and G2. Very good. Is that amenable to the and the second? All right. We now have a consent list of E1 through E4, E6 through E8, F1 through F4, G3 through G7, H1, and H2.
I believe it's G2 through.
Mr. Secretary, I thought you had asked for G1 to be removed and G2, is that correct?
No, G1 and G6. G2, I have not asked to be removed.
I'm sorry. G1, G2 through G5, G7, H1, and H2. Thank you for the clarification. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nay? Nays? That motion carries. We have a consent list. I would entertain a motion to
Mr.
approve the,
Chairman,
you've been moved?
would move the consent list.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second? Been seconded by the auditor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays?
Aye. I said, sorry, I was a little slow on the unmute.
No.
Aye.
No worries, I'm waiting. So those carry.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman. The next matter on your agenda is a presentation by the State Forester of the Forestry and Fire Report.
Thank you, Madam Forrester.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. First, Happy New Year. I have high hopes for another great year for us, ahead of us for state forestry.
How would you define that?
Less acres burned will be a success. I've provided each board member a copy of State Forestry's 2024 annual report, along with an informational handout about wildfire management in Wyoming. I'd like to start my presentation with a few quick introductions. We have some visitors here from the wildfire community attending today. We have Washakie County Fire Warden Chief Chris Coker. And we have Bighorn County Fire Warden Chief Brent Godfrey, as well as Goshen County Fire Warden Tom Bozeman, all here today. And it's always a pleasure to have our fire wardens here to visit us in Cheyenne.
Thank you.
So I'm going to kick off our presentation about 2024 wildfire, the season and the summary. So Wyoming recorded 2,167 fires that burned approximately 850,429 acres. 84% of the fires reported were on state and private lands, and that burned approximately 70% of the total acres. Wyoming's largest wildfire in history was the House Straw Fire, and that burned over 176,000 acres in Johnson County. 24 emergency fire suppression account fires were approved within 13 different counties. State responsibility suppression costs estimated for these fires totaled $55 million out of an estimated total cost of $103 million total for those fires. Wyoming received 4 FEMA fire management assistance grants for the Happy Jack, Pleasant Valley, House Straw, and Elk fires. Wyoming also received a disaster declaration associated with the storm event that occurred across Wyoming August 20th through the 22nd for Johnson and Campbell counties. So State Forestry is currently working with Wyoming Homeland and Security on how we're going to roll wildfire suppression costs associated with the wildfires in those 2 counties. So that would be the Flat Rock, Constitution, and House Straw into the approved disaster declaration. Last year was the 21st season for the Wyoming State Helitack Program. State Forestry extended the contract into the end of October, with the program responding to a fire on their last day of contract at Glendo State Park. The program ended with record numbers of missions and flight hours, 76 missions and 249 flight hours. Our 2 single-engine air tankers were based out of the Casper Tanker Air Base, the brand new base. The seats responded to 53 wildfires and provided 190 retardant drops. Last year was one of our busiest fire seasons for our Smoke Buster inmate hand crew by responding to fires starting in February and continued all the way into November. The crew responded to 31 fires in 9 different counties. And I do want to give a big shout out to Wyoming Department of Corrections for their coordination and support of this program with us. Last November, State Forestry conducted a post-wildfire survey of all 23 counties, as well as all Wyoming National Forest units and BLM. All 23 counties responded, representing 70 fire districts and 100 fire departments. The handout I provided you on the first page informs you about who our fire wardens are and what firefighting resources the counties and the federal agencies provide to wildfire suppression. Top 3 resources counties provide are volunteer firefighters, engines, and tenders, while our federal partners provide engines, dispatchers, and firefighters. These resources are very needed, as State Forestry does not provide these resources consistently for wildfire suppression. On the back side of the handout is the result of feedback we received about the most important resources State Forestry provides for wildland fire. As you can see, the top resource for counties and federal partners is our aviation. There were comments from fire wardens that our aviation is gold in the sky. There was also comments about our aviation never being available because they were limited and already out on other fires, as well as comments really recognizing that our aviation can catch a wildfire before ever needing to open the emergency fire suppression account and how critical that can be to suppression costs. There's also no shortage of feedback on fire suppression resource needs and identified statewide gaps after a fire year we experienced. It was an eye-opener for us and for the wildfire community. And from this survey, we've started to work together on some solutions for these identified gaps. And first part was to recognize what those gaps really were. So with that, I'm going to pause here and see if you have any questions.
Are there questions?
Okay, we'll move on. We'll talk about Good Neighbor Authority. In 2024, State Forestry's Good Neighbor Authority program grew with an addition of the GNA Forester in Du Bois, who was funded through the National Forest Foundation and the Shoshone National Forest. State Forestry has recently filled our Bridger Teton GNA Forester position in Pinedale as well. We're finalizing paperwork, but are planning to offer our first permanent GNA Forester position located in the Black Hills in the coming weeks. And lastly, we have coordinated with the Bighorn National Forest and Buffalo BLM to create a year-round forester position that will be funded through GNA agreements. So this would mean all 5 districts will have year-round GNA positions. In state fiscal year 2024, our foresters sold 9.8 million board feet of timber on 2,550 acres of state and federal lands. We also administered 58 projects that included timber sales, fuels reduction, and forest health improvement projects on 11,000 acres of state, private, and federal lands. Looking back on 2024, we had many firsts for our programs that we deliver. A few highlights: State Forestry held our first ever wildfire dozer training. We implemented our first Wyoming native tree planting on state trust lands and held our first ever Wyoming Tree Academy, which focused on supporting Wyoming's urban and community forestry programs. And I hope you enjoy reviewing our annual report and learning about all of our achievements in 2024. Lastly, I do want to give an update of current regional and national forest policy. State Forestry has noticed a significant reduction in the amount of timber volume being sold in certain national forests in Wyoming, causing concern and questioning about how we can help. Next week, State Forestry staff will be meeting with Region 2 and Region 4 leadership, each forest supervisor, along with timber staff, to discuss barriers and needs of each national forest in Wyoming. We expect to come out in next week's meeting with a plan to mobilize necessary state and federal staff to help in priority areas within Wyoming get critical prep work done in order to sell more federal timber yet this year. Lastly, the new administration transition has started, and changes to federal funding, staffing, and policies within the Bureau of Land Management and U.S. Forest Service is unknown. A few of our federal grants have been put on pause as the Forest Service assesses how they do or do not meet the new executive orders on DEI and energy. Specifically, we are not sure how the Community Wildfire Defense Grants and the recently awarded $1.5 million forest landowner cost share funds will still be available per their awarding or pulled back. The board will be updated once we actually receive final decisions on these grants. And with that, I will end my presentation here and open it up for any questions the board may have.
Are there questions? Kelly, I have a couple. You said the decline in sales of logs out of our forests. Is that a demand issue or a supply issue?
Chairman, that is a supply issue. We have at least 2 forests, if not almost all of the forests in Wyoming, not meeting their timber targets right now, and substantially much lower than we've seen in years.
And is that a personnel issue or is that a policy issue? As to the degree that you can mention it. I mean, they might be communicating, we just don't have people.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's a little bit of both, you could say. The priorities shift, and I think it's a little bit of a management issue, personnel, and making sure things are still getting done at that level. And there was a big fire, couple fire seasons for our federal partners as well, and they were also stretched thin. But we are not seeing the money coming into our local units. We're not seeing the hiring of the local staff at the local level. And so that is our concern. And what I spoke to both Region 2 and Region 4 regional leadership, as well as the forest supervisors, and said, what can we do to help? How can we bring our own staff in? What can we do to lay these sales out and help you get this done so that we aren't so far behind, we lose industry.
Good. The other question I have is, I think the Trump administration has signaled pretty clearly their sort of change in approach in FEMA, perhaps a bit on seasonals. Are they communicating anything directly with you, or, and this is sort of just scuttlebutt at this point?
Mr. Chairman, I have been in contact with our up-and-coming Undersecretary of Ag, Mike Bourne, and have been reached out to the Deputy Undersecretary, Kristen Sleeper. They're not confirmed yet, so decisions haven't been made yet. There is a lot of input being asked of our states and our state foresters on wildfire policy and management, forest policy and management, and really re-looking at what we can do on the ground together at the local units. And so we'll see where this all plays out, because at a higher level than the Forest Service or the BLM, there's additional things happening, such as our federal agencies being offered resignations. And we're looking at seeing those declines and having to manage that at the local unit levels too, at each national forest.
And we should know the results of that today.
Yes, Chairman, that is correct. Today is their last day to make their decisions on whether they will resign.
And I guess I'm also wondering, because at least at a couple of meetings I've had with the president, he's been very clear about states taking responsibility for fire. Don't know if that's been communicated, but I think on our side, what are we doing?
Mr. Chairman, in conversations with our up-and-coming undersecretary, we made it pretty clear how well we do fire together at the local level between our federal partners and our counties and state, and how we cost share, how we work together, and where our challenges lie when we decide not to go full suppression in certain areas of our state, and making sure there's some real clear national guidance that can come down to help all of us, whether it's a state and private fire or a federal fire. There should be pretty streamlined decision-making that needs to be occurring, and also the funding that needs to be there to help with the decisions that are getting made, because many times fire is trying to figure out how they can suppress something on very tight budgets. And so the rest of the agency then is trying to manage that change and shift in how much money a region may or may not have, depending on how much fires they have in their region throughout the summer.
Sure. So the last thing, and I know you haven't got anything else on your plate, so if it's we're working on it, that's fine. But in the Sheridan watershed and the Ranchester watersheds, what are the things that we're looking at there?
Mr. Chairman, there's been multiple local level meetings occurring between state agencies, county agencies, as well as with our federal partners. As the snowpack continues, as the weather continues, making sure we're monitoring closely what could or could not be happening come this spring with weather events and the snowpack coming off. But there has been quite a bit of grassroots working groups, whether it brings in NRCS, brings in the conservation districts, and brings in our state agencies, looking at what we can do and what we need to prepare for, depending on what could be coming. In particular, more mitigation probably around those water facilities is a top priority right now. As snowpack and things come off, being prepared to go in and having to mitigate, because we do not want to lose Sheridan's only water source, with drinking water source.
And do you have adequate resources for that, or I mean, just broadly? I mean, never enough, but.
Mr. Chairman, that is a great question. I can't even fully answer right now because I haven't been up to those meetings. I do believe that if there is a need, they have been informed to inform us of what that needs to be and what that needs to look like for additional resources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank your team. Thanks for the fire wardens being here as well. Good to see you all. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, the next item on your agenda is item G1, sand, gravel, borrow material, and riprap rock lease renewal applications. This is a matter for 3 renewal applications. The recommendation for all 3 is that the board approve the applications subject to the reference standard stipulations and allow the director to issue the leases effective February 2nd, 2025.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just want to understand, I want to vote no on one of these, and the motion is a bundle. So what's the procedure for that? Do I take it off the list once the motion's made or whatever?
I think we're on the item now.
Okay. I just want to, if it's going to be a bundled motion, I just want to be able to vote no on one of them, so.
Okay. Why don't we do one by one, if that's all right?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I would move approval of the renewal for lease SG-01968.
It's been moved by the auditor, seconded by the superintendent. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Madam Auditor.
I would move approval of lease SG-01969.
That's been, motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nay. Okay, that's an aye. Thank you. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of lease SG-01970.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays?
I'm a no on this one.
Thank you. That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item on your agenda is G6. This is for uranium lease applications. Mr. Chairman, there are 42 lease applications on this matter. Each one is recommended to be approved, subject to the reference standard stipulations, and to allow the director to issue the leases effective February 2nd, 2025.
Mr. Secretary.
This came up in our briefing, Mr. Crowder. Want to understand a little bit more on this 43991. In light of the Casper situation, what communication has been had with the community on the proximity of that and to the community, and what sort of communication has there been, just letting everybody know? And
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Booth, who would have some more detail about this particular lease.
Mr. Booth.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, I'm not aware of any direct communication that we have sent to the community of Bear Oil, which this lease lies within 0.9 miles from the edge of. But if I might, I would go over a little bit of how we review these applications, and maybe that gives you some comfortability with what we do in the communications that we have. So first, when we receive an application, we begin our initial process, and that really starts with making sure that we have the application in complete form, the application fee, and the $1 rental per acre. And so without the rental and that application fee, we can't continue that process to review that application. Next, we're going to validate the acres and ensure that we do own that mineral asset, and we have the capability of issuing that lease. And then further, we're going to review and see whether there are conflicting applications for existing leases for the same use of the parcel. We're going to go on and make sure that the entity is able to do business in the state and they're compliant with the Secretary of State's office. And then we're also going to make sure that the company is compliant with all the divisions of the agency. So if we've got a company applying for a lease and they're a bad actor in other leases, whether it's uranium or other minerals, then we're going to flag that and we're going to say, hey, you've got to remediate these concerns. We want to see that you're doing better in these areas. So we're making sure when we issue these leases that we're entering into those contracts with companies who are compliant with all divisions of our agency. And then we're also going to look for anything out of the ordinary and flag that and have those conversations as appropriate with the applicant. We're going to look and make sure if it's on institutional state trust lands, and if it is, we're going to try and work with that institution and ensure that it fits statutory requirements there. And once we've reviewed and conducted all those requirements, we're going to send that over to the Game and Fish Department and also SHPO and have those agencies provide comments on those. And so once the application appears to be adequate, the applicant is contacted and they're given the appropriate rules and regulations, surface impact payment instructions, bonding requirement information, advice to contact the Department of Environmental Quality, who's the regulatory authority on these, and any other relevant information on a case-by-case basis. So I think what's important there is we are letting them know that the regulatory authority is the DEQ, and they need to reach out and work with them and ensure that if they are going to receive a permit to go forward with their mining activities, that they're doing so in protecting air quality, land, water resources. And so we don't have direct communication with that community that I'm aware of as of right now, but those are the steps that we take when we review these.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, follow up?
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Same thing here. I mean, we got a list of, whatever, I think 40. And I think I'm going to vote no on this one. Not because I'm saying there's anything necessarily wrong here, but I think we need to think about a procedure of communicating with the municipality and the county at a certain point. It just hasn't happened here. And I know that's not the procedure, but I just think it needs to be thought about in terms of board policy. So I don't know how that's going to look, but that's kind of where I'm at on that one. So thank you. In light of some of the issues we've had and we had something that really has been a huge issue that nobody knew about in the affected community. So I think that one, I appreciate the addition on the, I really appreciate Mr. Booth working on that, on these. He really implemented the idea here on the distance from population centers, but we get these materials pretty late. I've made that pretty clear, and there just hasn't been time for me to get there on this one. So I don't know what the procedure is going to be, but I just want to make that clear so we can work it out.
Mr. Chairman,
Madam Auditor.
I would move approval of all items in Board Matter G6 except lease number 0-43991.
Thank you. That motion's appropriate. It's been seconded by the superintendent. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That motion carries. Those are approved.
Mr. Chairman,
Madam Auditor.
I would move approval of lease 0-43991 in Board Matter G6.
It's been moved and it's been seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays?
I'm a no.
That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have one walk-in matter for you today. It is to consider a proposed acquisition of real property as state trust land in Sublette County. NGL Water Solutions LLC committed an air quality violation and is subject to Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality penalties. NGL is offered as a partial settlement to convey approximately 500 acres of land in Sublette County to the state of Wyoming. The DEQ is not authorized to own land by statute. Therefore, they have asked that the board accept and acquire the lands on their behalf. And if acquired, these lands will be free of charge to the board and free from any DEQ imposed encumbrances or limitations. It is also important to note that the violation committed by NGL was not committed on this subject property. Mr. Chairman, this is a request to simply allow OSLI to continue the analysis and acquisition process as required by the board's rules. It is not final approval of the proposed acquisition. The next steps in the land acquisition process is to acquire an appraisal of the parcel, assess the existence and importance of any wildlife habitat and wildlife-oriented recreational opportunities located on the property as determined by the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, to assess the existence and importance of any public recreation opportunities or cultural resources located on the property as determined by the Wyoming Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources, to complete the potential revenue generation and value appreciation analysis of the property, to further assess and compare the management of the property, and to further evaluate the extent to which the proposed acquisition would provide or improve a school or community need, or improve public access and recreational opportunities. And finally, to provide notice directly to owners of land adjoining the lands proposed for acquisition and to the Board of County Commissioners from the affected county or counties. The director recommends that the board approve the resolution authorizing the Office of State Lands and Investments to enter into an option to purchase real property with NGL Water Solutions LLC and allow the office to begin its analysis of the acquisition by preparing a detailed analysis of the transaction. Mr. Chairman, for more explanation about the parcel specifically, I'll turn it over to Mr. Booth.
Mr. Booth.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we're recommending the acquisition of the surface estate only, so I want to point that out initially. The parcel for acquisition, it's located in Sblc County, approximately 9 miles from or south of the town of Boulder, Wyoming. It includes portions of 3 different sections, sections 24, 25, and 26 in Township 31 North, Range 108 West. And these sections are illustrated in red on the map that is on the screen and also in the handout. US Highway 191 bisects the southeast-southwest of Section 24, and the remaining portions of the property can be publicly accessed by 2-track roads to the east, west, and south that traverse adjacent BLM property. We've preliminarily reviewed the proposal, we've toured the location, we've presented the proposal to the director in an internal review team meeting, and presented this acquisition to the board in executive session. During the tour, no visible resource concerns were identified that would pose a high risk to the state of Wyoming if acquired. Additionally, a Phase 1 analysis was completed in 2018 prior to the property being purchased by NGL Water Solutions. The Phase 1 indicates the property is considered low risk for environmental concerns. The director has approved for the proposal to be moved to Category 2, and the board is authorized for us to be here today because the acquisition may meet one of the trust land management objectives. There are 3 trust land management objectives, and for a transaction to move forward, it doesn't need to meet all 3, just one of those. And those are better meet the beneficiary's short and long-term objectives, improve the manageability of the land asset, and meet a specific school and/or community need. The proposed acquisition appears to meet the beneficiary's short and long-term objectives. It's anticipated the acquisition would generate additional grazing and agriculture lease revenue, expand possible future development opportunities as it lies in close proximity to many oil and gas resources, and then additionally a higher land corpus value would be realized by acquiring land without cost to the board. And those are the details.
Thank you, Mr. Booth.
And Mr. Chairman, just to add on to that, the board had indicated some question about the DEQ's process and how we got here. And we have Ms. Nancy Veer in the audience if the board has any questions from DEQ.
Ms. Veer, good to see you.
Nancy Veer with the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, Air Quality Division. I'm the administrator of that division, and happy to tell you that when we work with companies that have what we call alleged violations and we go through a settlement process, And that's what we did here in the NGL situation. There were some alleged violations starting in 2020. And we are currently still talking to them about getting those resolved. There were some additional violations that occurred in 2021 and 2023. They have since sold their assets to Pure West, and so they are no longer operating in the Sublette County area. So this is part of that process. We're in negotiations still with them, so I can't go into what those negotiations are, but happy to be able to present this as an option. We're always trying to look for ways that we can resolve alleged violations with companies in creative ways sometimes.
Thank you. Questions? Ms. Vera, I think one of the issues that I think about is there's no potential liabilities that you could see on any of this land if we were to proceed with it, with regard to the settlement or other aspects of that.
That is correct. The facilities that were the subject of the violation, there's no facilities permitted on this land. Those facilities that were subject to the violation were off-site elsewhere within the county.
Very good, thank you. Further questions? If there are none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I would move the director's recommendation that we approve the resolution authorizing OSLI to enter into an option to purchase real property with NGL Water Solutions LLC and allow the office to begin its analysis of the acquisition by preparing a detailed analysis of the transaction.
It's been moved by the auditor, seconded by the superintendent. Any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, it's really gonna be more of a gift because there's no cost to us. I don't know whether the purchase is gonna be, I guess maybe we have $1, so it's a purchase, but it's, you know, I mean, the state can accept gifts and other contributions, so I'm wondering if we get some clarification, does it have to be a purchase from the DEQ standpoint?
Ms. Veer.
This would be part of the resolution. Usually what we do when we have a settlement is we come up with a monetary value. And so if the property appraises below that value, then the settlement would likely include the property plus some other consideration from the company. If the property appraises higher than what the value is, that would probably be lumped into our our settlement of trying to make sure that we're not in a situation at the DEQ of trying to purchase property. We look to see how we could get to the right dollar amount for the resolution.
So Mr. Chairman, I guess clarification, if it's a purchase, we're purchasing it from the DEQ, or are we purchasing it from the other person, and our purchase price, is it locked in? I know the appraisal determines how much, I guess, the alleged, I guess, NGL has as far as what they owe on their bill, but how does that equate to the I guess the bookkeeping for the state?
And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Treasurer, I can try to answer that. So functionally, the office is only allowed by your rules to enter into an option to purchase. That's the name of the agreement that we have to go through. Within the resolution that Ms. Veer brought up, there is a discussion about there will be no payment to NGL, and that is who we are acquiring the property from, but no payment by the state to NGL for acquisition of the property, and that the resolution only allows acquisition of the property at zero cost. So we have to keep the word purchase because that's the tool and the mechanism that the board's allowed us to move forward in a situation like this. But inside of the resolution, it says no money will be changing hands. And if there is a discrepancy in value based on the settlement need by DEQ, it'll be handled, as Ms. Veer mentioned, by monetary NGL providing that to DEQ or other settlement negotiations that she mentioned.
Because, and the reason I bring this up, because we talked about whether it's a gift or not a gift, and I thought it was gonna be a gift, and now it's a purchase now, and I wasn't informed that it had to be a purchase, so, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Veer. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays? That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, that's everything we have for the Board of Land Commissioners today. So it would be appropriate to convene as a State Loan and Investment Board again.
All right. Yeah, I'm hoping we can move through fairly quickly. Right. All right, Interim Director.
Mr. Chairman, today's State Loan and Investment Board meeting has been properly noticed as a regular meeting. The first item on the agenda is to consider the December 5th, 2024 regular meeting minutes and the January 2nd, 2025 special meeting minutes.
Members of the board, you have had a chance to review the minutes. Are there corrections, clarifications, comments? If there are none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the minutes from the December 5th, 2024 and January 2nd, 2025 State Loan and Investment Board minutes.
Motion. Motion's been made and seconded by the superintendent. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Interim Director.
Mr. Chairman, we have provided the board with the usual reports behind tab B. We do not have anything to add at this time, but would stand for any questions.
Any questions on the matters behind tab B? Any questions? Hearing none, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, noting that we have provided the materials for this meeting in advance and have briefed each of you individually prior to the meeting, at this time I'm prepared to propose a consent list if the board would like.
It's a pleasure of the board. I think it's a good idea.
Mr. Chairman, the following matters are amenable for treatment on a consent list. Matter E1, matter F1, and matters I1 through I3.
You've heard the recommendation, E1, F1, I1 through I3.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would move the consent list as presented, including E1, F1, I1 through I3.
Yep.
Motion's been made. Is there a
Mr.
second?
Chairman, I'd like to remove I3.
All right. E1, F1, I1, and 2, is that okay? The maker of the motion, is there a second?
Second?
It's been seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. That we have a consent list. I would entertain a motion for the director's recommendation on the items on the consent list.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Is there a second?
Second?
Been seconded by the auditor. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next matter on the agenda for your consideration is to consider 24 funding applications for federal mineral royalty capital construction account grants. Mr. Chairman, the legislature approved funding for the 25-26 biennium for the MRG program at $27,306,873. This amount has been reduced by $2,600,008,520 for program administration and the Office of State Land and Investments match for the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Program. As of December 31st, 2024, the board has a remaining balance of $24,561,853 for the 25-26 biennial appropriation available for funding emergency and regular MRG applications through the end of this biennium, and that would be June 30th, 2026. Mr. Chairman, many worthwhile projects have been submitted for the board's consideration today. Unfortunately, there is a limited amount of MRG funding available to address the needs of the applicants over the course of this biennium. And in the spirit of equitable funding throughout the biennium, we have prepared 3 lists for the board's consideration: a full funding list, partial funding list, and a no funding list. Mr. Chairman, we have received just under $14 million in total grant requests for this meeting and are recommending $6,461,121 to be awarded. This will leave the board with just over $18 million for the remainder of the biennium to fund future projects and any emergencies that may arise. It's also important to note that this is the first of 4 regular funding meetings scheduled for the 25-26 biennium. Mr. Chairman, OSLI did share all of the applications received for today's meeting with the Grant Review Committee, and that committee is made up of the representatives from the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, Wyoming Water Development Office, and the Wyoming State Fire Marshal's Office. The review committee prioritized the applications in 5 different categories, and those were water, sewer, landfills, transportation, and emergency services. The applications were then considered for funding recommendations considering the following factors: historic funding, outstanding grant amounts, amount of money the applicant is requesting, the amount of MRG funding available, the status of the project. Is the project ready to move forward, in other words? Has the applicant hired an engineer or a consultant? Are there other funding sources involved? And will failure to secure this grant jeopardize other funding? Can the project be phased? What are the rates charged compared to state averages? Is the applicant providing matching funds, or is the state providing the matching funds through another program? Is the applicant proposing a project that is in excess of its needs? Is there a more cost-effective technical solution? And how many projects in this category will be recommended for funding? For example, recommended projects from each category so that no single category has more favorable status than another. At this time, Mr. Chairman, we can provide you with a consent list for the full funding projects if you'd like, or I'm happy to turn it over to Ms. Doring or Ms. Blackwell to answer any questions about the process or any particular application.
Thank you, Interim Director. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know that I'm prepared to do a full consent list of the full funding, but I had looked at ones that were a smaller amount of $350 or less and would propose a consent list as such of that. Those are a lot smaller projects, full recommendation from the Grant Review Committee, and involve, police cars, ambulance replacement, those sort of needs. So would propose that if that's amenable to the chair.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, would propose a consent list of applications number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And again, those are all under $350,000, really small projects for those that pass through the Grant Review Committee.
Okay, the motion has been made. Is there support for the motion?
I'll second that motion.
It's been seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move the consent list as created.
Excellent. Motion has been made. Is there support for the motion?
Second, I'm assuming this is Director's Rec?
Yeah,
or
the Director's
full
Rec.
funding.
Yeah.
Okay. Second.
Yep. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank
Aye.
you. That motion carries. Are there further motions?
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Auditor, Superintendent, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might suggest that we start walking through now one by one and seeing if there's public comment available on those projects that are now larger than $350,000.
So starting with number 1, is there objection to that process? If there is none, do you want to talk about the first City of Buffalo alluvial well supply connection to water treatment plant, $479,570. Ms. Doring, do you want to discuss that project? Is there anyone from the town of Buffalo here? There you are. Yeah. And you might have to press the little guy who looks like he's sneezing. There.
Mr. Chairman, board members, I'm Kevin Sobernagel, Public Works Director for the City of Buffalo. With me is Jeff Barron, WWC engineer on the project. I'll let him answer any specific questions you might have about the project.
Are there questions for the City of Buffalo? Any questions? Mr. Treasurer.
What's the percentage of funding, the 479, 570? Is that 50%, 100%, 25%?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Treasurer, it's below 50%. We got some matching from the Water Development Office out of their sponsor contingency fund. So we asked for a lower percentage from this board.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, their request is equal to 16% of the project costs.
Thank you. Further questions? If there are none, I'd entertain a motion.
Move director's rec, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Second.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Mr. Secretary, Superintendent beat you to the switch, but.
I'll second it too.
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nays? Congratulations. Thanks. We were worried you might be falling asleep back there. So.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. The next is City of Sundance, 3rd Street Water Line, $850,862. Paul, good to see you.
I never took on a job the staff couldn't do, and now they kind of back away from the staff. I would, this is a deal that.
Could you just identify yourself, Paul?
I'm Paul Brooks, I'm the mayor of Sundance, Wyoming. This is a deal of inflation. We originally identified this project. We went into it, we thought we had the correct funding, we thought we had enough money. But then the COVID crisis hit and we came out short, so this is the backfill to make the project complete. And it's a big project. It crosses a live creek. It replaces a bunch of 1940 steel line. And it also, we have a steel line that's out in the DOT that we're gonna be able to abandon because we're gonna retap 19 homes onto this project. If we don't get this money, we may have to scale it back. We have gone through the steps of, you know, bid alternatives, right? This is the core project, but we'd like this an alternative and that alternative. So if we did not get the money, we could move forward with the bulk of the project. But, you know, every time you do that, then you go back and you pay a second mobilization and you pay all the fees up front. So what we're here for today is to ask you for this money.
Very good, thanks. Further questions?
Mr. Chairman, I would just make a statement that I believe this is one of the projects we have before us too, that is part of the match and funding sources, ARPA.
Yeah.
So these have some level of,
Urgency.
there you go, yeah,
Urgency would be good.
yeah, thank you. I was gonna say hair on fire-ness.
I've learned to be calm over the years. You know, this old fellow told me many years ago the surest cure for drinking and carousing is old age, and he was right. And I don't get worked up like I used to either.
Oh, just stick around.
I can see that.
All right, further questions? If there are none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent. I'll get
Mr.
that straight.
Chairman, would recommend, would move director's recommendation on, for the city of Sundance, Third Street Waterline.
Second, is there a second? Second. It's been seconded by the auditor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That motion carries. Thanks, Paul.
Governor, members of the board, interim director and staff, thank you guys for what you do. It's tough, it's a tough environment out there right now, and it's taken a toll on all of us. And I don't think you hear the words thank you enough, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that leaves us with, on the full funding list, project number 10, Sweetwater County Library, White Mountain Library HVAC replacement, $546,980. Good morning. Up, sneeze. There we are.
Oh, this is the first time this side has
Yeah.
been working. So, good morning. My name is Christina Marshall with Sweetwater County Government, and I'm here with Lindsay Travis, the Sweetwater County Library Director. Sweetwater County sponsored this project for the library to apply. I just want to note, we are applying for a 50-50 match. Of noteworthy, the library is kicking in $100,000. They had to break open their piggy bank. They're not a revenue generating entity. This was money they've saved over the years. So Sweetwater County kicked in the additional portion of the match. So we are happy to answer any specific questions you may have on this very worthwhile project.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Mr. Chairman, would move director's recommendation on Sweetwater County Library for the HVAC replacement.
It's been moved
Second.
and it's been seconded. Is there any discussion? I would just say thank you for coming all this distance. It's important that you are here. It always makes a difference.
Mr. Chairman, I've been with the county 26 years, seen a lot of projects in here. This remodel is spectacular. The seats are wonderful, so thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Mr. Treasurer, is that an aye? That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Mr. Chairman, could I request possibly a 5-minute restroom break before we get into the partial funded?
Sure.
Thank you.
We'll do a 5-minute restroom break. Thanks. that we are once again full quorum, and so we can proceed.
Mr. Chairman, you have approved everything on the full funding list. We are on to the partial funding list. We can walk through those project by project if you like. Or-
Sure, I think that probably is, so the first one would be Town of Ranchester, water treatment plant enhancements and alternate water source. I think the requested amount was $2,580,000, and the recommended amount was $300,000. Ms. Ory.
Mr. Chairman, the recommendation from the funding committee on the town of Ranchester, I would like to point out this was initially submitted as an emergency project due to concerns of the fire and runoff to their water systems. And we had communicated with the project lead in the town of Ranchester and determined that they could bring it as a regular application to this meeting. And our partners had recommended $300,000 to do a study to look at what was needed to shore up their infrastructure with the knowledge that if there were any emergencies due to spring runoff, that they could come back at that time as well.
I think the town of Ranchester is here, so if you want to come on up and kind of explain if that puts you in a predicament or not. And you'll have to
hit the button.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, board members, Jeff Barron, WWC Engineering, on behalf of the town of Ranchester. Even though the ask was originally in the 2.5 million, the 300,000 would definitely be put to good use. One for backup generators for the water treatment plant. They are looking at some potential runoff due to the elk fire this year. And then to, similar to the city of Buffalo, look at an alternate water supply. So a study to look at some alternate sources, really to mitigate some of the same efforts that would come from the elk fire, sedimentation in the river where they might need some clean water, where they can't meet public drinking water standards with the river supply that they have.
Great. What's up with the town of Dayton? Do they have a different location? Is there any?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the town of Dayton has both water from the Tongue River itself, and they've got a backup well as a source of supply.
I see. Okay. Further questions? Oh, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to confirm with Jeff that these funds will be used to purchase generators also?
They're considering that if it would fit within the realm of the grant.
So I guess that's a decision for the board because the funding recommendation is for, the funds are for a study. And so we just need clarification what the board approves those funds to be used for. A study and generators. I just want to make sure that what's approved is what they need.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Blackwell.
Mr. Chairman, so
Yeah.
it sounds like maybe you would like a little more flexibility to do both or either?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Auditor, the idea would be for both. We would like that flexibility, correct?
All right. Further questions? Any? So obviously, Ms. Barron, that begs the question: what if generators are required? Does that impact the study? If generators aren't required, will that fill the space for the study? Do we need all of it for the study? Yeah, I'm just, what's the discipline that you'd put to that?
Mr. Chairman, the town of Ranchester feels that they can accommodate both a backup generator and full function of the study necessary to complete an alternate water supply.
Okay. All right. Any further questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the recommended amount of $300,000 with the clarification that it is for a study for sure, but also open to generators.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Next, we have the City of Riverton, Spruce Street Water and Sewer, $571,562. And the recommendation is $360,000. So City of Riverton here. Oh, there you are. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. This project.
Could you identify
Oh,
yourself?
I'm sorry, Brian Eggleston, Public Works Director. This project will replace some undersized water lines that are failing in the area. Where primarily the composition of those water lines is asbestos concrete, and the sewer line that's proposed to be replaced in that area as well is undersized, and it's older clay tile pipe, all ranging in the early 50s for installation.
Thanks. Questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you speak to the 360,000 and so how that would impact the project to be lower than the 570 and if you're still able to move forward?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Superintendent, it will adjust the scope a little bit, but it's not going to stop the project from happening. We may just not do as much line.
Sorry, Ms. Blackwell, did you have a, okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thanks for being here. Have you spoke to any of your legislators regarding just this pot of funding in general?
Not this pot of funding, no.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, this may or may not be appropriate. I would note that all of your legislators voted against increasing this funding. So just for the future, and maybe not even so much for you, but for your elected officials, that if this money is important, I'd be talking to them.
Thank you. I wasn't aware.
Yeah. I think arguably they may be counting on that. So anyway, yeah, thank you. I think that goes for everybody. Further comment? If there is none, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the recommended amount of $360,000 to Riverton.
Been seconded by the treasurer, is that correct? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, that motion carries. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Mr. Chairman and board members.
We now have the town of Fort Laramie Sewer and Water Improvements Phase 5. The requested amount was $721,170, and the recommended amount is $550,000. Is anyone here from the town of Fort Laramie? Is there anyone here from Fort Laramie? Anyone online, Mr. Bump?
Mr. Chairman, no hands currently raised. If you're out there and you'd like to speak, please raise your hand.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I would note that the partial funding amount is based on what they put in their application as the minimum amount that they could take if partial funding was awarded.
All right, what?
Move director's recommendations, Mr. Chairman, for 550.
Okay, director's recommendation has been moved. Is there support for the motion? Is there support for the motion? Is there
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The motion's been moved and seconded by the secretary. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I'm a no, Mr. Chairman, not because of the project, but I need someone here to ask questions.
That would be mine too, so that motion does carry with a 3-2 vote. 3 favorable. Next is the town of Opal Stormwater. Requested amount was $649,750. And recommended is $487,600. Is anyone here from the town of Opal? Is there anyone here down of Opal? Is there anyone online from the town of Opal? All right. Ms. Blackwell, do you want to outline a little bit what that is?
Sure. Once again, this partial funding amount was listed in their application as the minimum amount they needed to complete phase 1 of the project.
All right. Our own, I think one of our only ammunition manufacturers in the state is in the town of Opal. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'd move Director's Rex, but don't know how far that will go.
Okay, the motion has been made. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? I think the same point.
Mr. Chairman, just recognizing that we're in the first of funding meetings for this, I do think if these projects are important, we'll see them again and be able to ask questions. And, you know, we're trying to spread peanut butter pretty thin today. And so I think it's really important for us to be able to talk to somebody, whether it be over the phone or Zoom or whatever, and say, does this part, particularly on these funding partial recommendations, I want to know that this amount will work, that it's not too harmful, that sort of thing, so.
Right.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Treasurer.
I guess some clarification as far as, we can't table these to the next funding meeting, and when is the next funding meeting? Is that June?
Jim.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct, Mr. Treasurer. We do not hold applications. However, the next due date for applications is February 20th, so they could take the application that didn't get funded this time, update it, include if they don't have their 2024 financial information, they would have to update it for that, pass a new resolution and submit it back to our office, and we would include it in the next batch of applications.
Thank you.
Have any of you had any communication from the town of Opal? Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second, so I'm going to move to the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nays?
No.
That motion fails. Thank you both for making the motion and seconding it. Appreciate it. Next is Hot Springs County. That is the Black Mountain Rehab and Reconstruction Project. $2,872,127 was requested. $1,500,000 was recommended. Please, good to see you. Thanks for coming down.
You bet. Glad to be here. I'm Tom Ryan. I'm the chairman of the Hot Springs County Commission. I brought with me Dusty Spomer, and my other two commissioners are here as well. Dusty's with Ardura, and so if we have technical questions on this project, you know, this project, the ask of roughly 2.8 is about 35% of this project. The recommended amount of 1.5 is about 19%. You know, 2.2 would keep us pretty whole in the project. It's about 28%. It's a project we've been working on. It's a road into the northeast part of Hot Springs County that accesses, it's only the only access into the northeast part of Hot Springs County, and we just appreciate your consideration.
Thanks, and I think, Mr. Chairman, you've probably had conversations with all the members of the board.
I have. We visited with you on Monday night, and then we visited with the rest of them yesterday when we came down.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Treasurer.
If there's no other conversations, I would move the Director's Rex on of 1.5 million for Hot Springs County.
Been moved. Is there support for the treasurer's motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that.
Okay, that motion's been seconded by the auditor. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to propose a friendly amendment in light of the last failure, that we increase.
Mr. Secretary, hold on just a sec. Superintendent, did you have?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason why I'm hesitant on this is I would like to discuss getting them to 2 and what difference that would make, because I think with the span of their project and the emergencies that have happened in the past, I think that that's important, because that will create longevity in the project another 10 years if they're able to do the chip seal. So
Okay.
that would be my preference.
And Mr. Secretary, it's just a little bit of a lag when you came in. That sounds like that's maybe something you're looking at too. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd like to propose a friendly amendment, in light of the last failure. I think thinking about how we could spread that out, I'd like to propose 1.9 million.
Okay, I'll hold that for a second so we can have a little bit of discussion and then we'll come back to that. So.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, if you could talk to us about kind of what gets you over the hump of the 2 versus 1. You're hearing a lot of numbers going around, and I think the most important thing for me is that chip seal that will add another 10 years to the project.
So the 2.2, would get us to where we could chip seal the entire 8.6 miles. Obviously, YDOT feels like that's important. They chip seal all their projects now. I think that extends the life of that whole project probably another 10 years. 2 million would get us pretty close to that. I think the county could use some of their county road fund to help make it up, and we'd be deeply appreciative.
Okay, thank you. The Secretary's proposed.
Either 1.9 or 2 is fine with me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, if do you want to second the Secretary's proposed motion?
I'll second the Secretary's proposal.
All right, Mr. Secretary, I think your motion has been seconded. Can you restate it just so we all know exactly what it is?
Well, thank you, Mr. Treasurer. It's 1.9 million, and just thinking about the failure of the last motion, and I think they can get there at 1.9, and I think if we go to 2, we're going to go over the cap. If we extend any other ones looking down the list, so that's the proposal. That's why I chose 1.9.
Okay, so we have an amendment to the main motion that's been moved and seconded, so I'm voting on the amendment at this point. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays?
Aye.
Okay, we have an amended motion. Any further discussion on the amended motion? If there is none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nays? That motion carries. Congratulations.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you to the members of the board.
Thank you. All right, next we have the Sublette County Hospital Ambulance. $174,950 was requested. $119,639 was recommended. Do you want to come on up, Julie? I thought you'd push the mayor out there, but he's.
Well, come on, Mayor Burdock. My name's Carrie DeWitt. I'm the Public Relations Director for the Hospital District. We want to thank you for seeing us in front. I've brought 2 people with me. Brian Mary is our Director of EMS, and I'll invite him to speak to our need for an ambulance. And Mayor Matt Murdock of the town of Pinedale is also with us.
Mr. Chairman.
Members of the board, good morning. How are you?
Doing well.
Thank you for allowing us to be here this morning. I just want to share a little bit about our ambulance fleet that we have currently. We do have 6 ambulances in Sblc County, one of which is out of service due to mechanical reasonings and has just over 220,000 miles on it. Last year, Sblc County ran 1,824 calls, which 869 of those were 911 calls and 287 were transfers. knowing that we're the last county in the state without a hospital, we have a long distance transport time. Our furthest being the University of Utah on one way at 235 miles, so round trip at 470. We spent a good amount of time last year at 416.5 hours with only one ambulance available in Sblc County. And then we spent 15.5 hours with 0 ambulances available in Sblc County. So my amazing staff of 31 people on their days off come in when needed, but we need the ambulances to be available and safe for us to be able to run those calls. I'll entertain any questions if you may have.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? I think the auditor's comments a little bit earlier are appropriate here too, but anyway, Mr. Treasurer.
I guess, if this moves forward, I think I'm gonna have to just tell you guys that we're in a different tax situation. And we're probably gonna have to start means testing on some of these things. And I hope you can understand that, because we had Luskin here for an ambulance last year, and we didn't approve it. And they necessarily had an old Ford that was having ejector problems that couldn't be even worked on anymore. And they were up against their total borrowing authority, no money in the bank, basically. And we said no. And I know you guys have probably got 178 million in the bank, more or less, in the county. And I guess that, right now we're not at that means testing thing, but with the tax proposals that are going through, you're gonna have to realize is that we're gonna have to start saying no to people that can afford it. And I hope you understand that. And I hope you appreciate it and agree with it too. But I don't know, that agreement might be asking too much. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Treasury, thank you, sir. Just to be clear, we have the 50% match with a generous donation from Jonah Energy and the Sblc County Health Foundation as well. So we do understand, but we do have that match already there.
Madam Auditor.
Mr. Chairman, you already mentioned this, but Mayor Carey, have you spoken to your legislators about this pot of funding? Because they've been no votes, just for the record.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Auditor, Mr. Treasurer, I've been here, Matt Murdock, Town of Pinedale Mayor. I've been here for several days and I've had several conversations with multiple legislators across the different counties and extremely frustrated. I've actually called it up several times in several committee hearings just in the last 12 hours.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think the mic's on. Did you?
Yep.
Sorry about that. It got turned off. Sorry, Mr. Secretary. So Matt Murdock, Mayor of Town of Pinedale, and I agree with you, sir. I think we're seeing a slate of taxes, and I think the concern that we have had and that we've spoken of very, very loudly are there are critical services that have to be maintained. And so we recognize the tax burden that our citizens are under, but at the same time, there is critical infrastructure that our citizens expect. As you probably know, Town of Pinedale is actually expected to grow to about 4,000 people by 2040. Just in the last 6 months alone, I've had multiple friends and family that had been ambulanced out of Sblc County. And so 15 hours without an ambulance is very risky and dangerous. And so I completely agree, Mr. Treasurer. These are very difficult times and these are very difficult choices. Congratulations on getting elected to that table. We're there to support you and fight wherever we can. Madam Auditor, your point is very well made. But anyhow, we would ask that you would consider this. I do want to point out that the EMS and also the hospital district is outside. So there is the Sblc County that does help, but it is a separate district. So this is being considered under a different pot. So just if you have any questions, happy to answer.
Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, when's the hospital be, the new one? I think we had 10 million of COVID money or whatever for that. What is it, 2-3 years construction and something like that?
It's, Mr. Treasurer, Mr. Chairman, it's slated to open July 1, 2025. We've spent most of that 10 million and construction's on track and on budget. And we have countdown clocks hanging in all the facilities, so it's 144 days from today we'll be open. So nothing more stressful than a countdown clock.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I'd also note, since the First Lady mentioned this to me this morning, Sblc does not have a functioning pantry to my knowledge. and you have one of the largest populations of food insecure kids in the state.
That is correct.
Yeah, thanks.
You know, Mr. Chairman, I do want to mention one thing here. I think that, you know, I just disagree with bringing up whether the local legislator voted for it. I just am not a fan of that. I think that, you know, I think I want to use the right word here, but it makes me uncomfortable, I guess is the right word. I think the funding passed and it's there and it's for distribution across the entire state, according to this board's will. And I just, it's my opinion. I'm a little uncomfortable with that. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Auditor.
Secretary, I don't disagree with you, and frankly, it makes me uncomfortable even bringing it up. And I don't think it would ever be fair to judge a project based on how a local legislator voted it one way or the other. And so I agree with you on that. I think my point more is, you know, in the 6 years on this board, I have really found that legislators don't want to hear from Slib board members to increase MRG funding, yet we're the ones here 12 months of the year seeing these emergency projects and telling them no. I think it is important for legislators to hear from their local constituents, whether it be their own constituents or from another county. So Mr. Secretary, I don't disagree with you, and like I said, I was hesitant to bring that up, but I do think that they don't really want to hear from me, and I've been beating that drum. So that was sort of my intention.
And I would just weigh in. It is a little tough to have a no vote on funding at one point and then have the same legislator come down to advocate for funding for their particular county from that pot. I understand that people want to make decisions about that, but it does seem a little bit at odds with the stated. But
Well,
appreciate
and
it.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to push back a little on that because we've had that happen, you know, a number of times. I think that, you know, you can vote on the floor, and then if it passes, then advocate for the proper distribution across the state, and that requires them to advocate for their communities. And so I understand the auditor's point, but I think doing it in this setting, it's just I'm a little uncomfortable with it. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's been said a couple times, and I know it's come out in letters that the governor's written. I just don't think it is proper at this time. So it's my opinion. Thank you.
Madam Superintendent.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move director's recommendation for the Sublette County Hospital ambulance.
Thank you. Then is there a support?
Second.
For that? It's been seconded by the secretary. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nay? Nays? Mr. Secretary, I assume you're an aye?
Yes, I'm an aye.
Yep, okay, the motion carries. Congratulations, thank you. Next, we have the Town of Lovell Town Hall expansion. $648,500 was requested. $165,000 was recommended. Is there anyone from the Town of Lovell, either here or online? Anyone from the Town of Lovell? All right. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I would move zero funding on Lovell, recognizing that it is a good project, but I'd like to be able to hear from local folks about the need and particularly whether a partial funding is worthwhile or kills the project. So.
Okay, so you moved a no fund. It's been seconded by the superintendent. All in favor of that motion, signify by saying aye.
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 Nays? Aye. Okay, so you were voting in against the motion? Yeah, okay, very good. So that that motion carries, which means that that funding is denied. All right. Moving on now to the no funding recommendations. The first one is the Sheridan Area Joint Powers Board, Gulch Road, 8-inch water line, $564,054 was requested. Is there anyone from the town of Sheridan here? Anyone? Anyone online?
I move Director's Rex, Mr. Chairman.
Director's Rec's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. Any
Mr.
discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just in recognition that these are no fundings and that the funding committee did meet and discuss each one, it might be good to provide just a little color
Sure.
from Ms. During or Ms. Blackwell on how they came to that decision.
Thank you. Ms. Dory.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we did meet and talk about this as a funding committee, and our recommendation was no funding. This was a large ask for the funding pot we had, and this application supports 8 connections, so 8 residents. And it is also part of their funding is currently pending SRF approval. It's intended to go on the intended use plan for 2026. So we thought it was just a little bit premature at this time.
Very good. Thank you. We have the motion. It's been seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays?
Aye.
You're a nay or an aye?
I'm an aye.
Okay, thank you. Director's rec is approved. Now we have the town of Upton repainting the water tower. $150,000 is requested. I do know that Mark is here. Ms. Oring, do you want to provide color before he addresses us?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, in this project, we were not, it wasn't that it was recommended as no funding due to the merits of the project. This project was just ranked lower in the other projects of the same category, as well as the town of Upton has received substantial funding from both the MRG and ARPA funding as well. And so at this point in time, the funding committee's recommendation to stay within the limits that we were working in of approximately $6.1 million was recommended as no funding.
Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Mark Lindstrom, Superintendent for the town of Upton. We did meet and I discussed my project with you folks, repainting that 180-foot water tower at the industrial park. It's just a matter of just getting it repainted and so it doesn't deteriorate any farther. So I'll entertain any questions or comments.
Any questions? Any comments? Madam Auditor.
Mark, how would you go about getting this project done without MRG funds?
I would seek other funding sources. I'd probably reapply this project back to the next round of funding also if I was unable to find adequate funding.
Okay. Further questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Would this fall into the community development block grant program or not?
No, sir, it would not. It would not fit there.
I knew you were an expert on that. So
yeah, well, I'm an expert and I can tell you right now, it would not fit.
Okay.
Mr. Lindstrom, you know, he brings up a very interesting point, the treasurer. And one of the things we were looking at for or I was looking at for Guernsey was the community block grant. Would that project have been possible for that?
The community block grant for Guernsey?
For the Guernsey expansion of their senior center.
I think in some time it was back in the day because I used the CDBG on a lot of our projects was used for a building expansion, built the industrial park actually through that program.
Yeah.
So I think it would have.
Yeah.
I
That
really
was one of the recommendations that we were making to them, but, okay.
You bet.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I guess from what I've seen is that they're leaning more toward like the business council and more infrastructure things. rather than what we call soft projects.
Right.
'Cause we've been trying to get a veterans park, kind of like in Cody and Newcastle for the last 3 years, and it's not gaining any traction at all. Part of it is the coordination of the sponsors necessarily is maybe not as robust as you'd like to see it. But yeah, so I think everybody's trying to run down the same road, and we gotta watch ourselves, I think, to make sure that we don't put do not enter signs on every one of
Right.
them.
Well, I think, and Beth has heard this a million times, but you know, the example of the the round table that I would love to see is one that has CDBG, has rural development, has all of the various funding sources, and hopefully it can be expedited somewhat by the grants management office to be able to kind of help. Because if you're the town tire shop, which is former mayor of KC, that's what and you're just going to look wherever you can. So
Yeah.
trying to help.
I guess a question for Mark, is this 150, 100% of the cost?
No, that, we have a $50,000 match on that also. Because of the height of the tank and what they have to do to refinish it, it's quite costly than a smaller tank.
So the total cost is about 200,000?
About 200,000 is
Okay.
what the estimate was given to us for.
Yeah.
We always hope it comes under, but.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, I would recommend.
I do have Secretary Gray has
okay.
his hand up. I'm sorry, Secretary.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. I mean, we're over this cap that the state land office set out. I mean, I guess the board kind of thinks that, I just want to make everybody aware that I think we're 500 over. Is that their math as well?
I'll ask Beth, Ms. Blackwell.
What's the percentage too, Beth? I had 26.92 when we started, but I don't know what it is right now, or the total.
So as of right now, the amount that has been recommended is $6,208,521. That is $252,600 less than what staff or director recommendations were.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
And that leaves you approximately 18.4 million after the fact.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but just want to be clear, this isn't a hard cap. This is kind of where we should be, and so we can be less or over.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Superintendent, that is correct. Generally, what staff has done is taken the pot of money we have, taken off the top the match and the things we need to do. Then with what we have left, we divide it by 4, but generally this first meeting, we're a little heavier on things because it allows projects to get going. And if those projects are completed and they come in under budget, those funds then are returned to the MRG program, and at a later meeting, we can turn around and re-grant those dollars out to another project.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam.
Subsequent comment. Mr. Lindstrom, really appreciate you making the trip as always and all of your hard work in this. I think for me on this one, this is probably one that we want to hold off on until a later meeting. I just, especially being one of the members that has, came on when MRG was completely defunded, I'm a little bit more conservative maybe in my approach of, especially with unforeseen emergencies that we might have come up. And so just wanted to explain that. Thank you.
Thanks, Superintendent. Madam Auditor, look, Mr. Treasurer, or Madam Auditor.
Yeah, I was going to make a motion for partial funding, but I'll let the auditor have the floor. That's fine.
I told Mr. Lindstrom I'd paint it for 100,000.
She did. Didn't put in writing, but she did say that. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, well, I guess, Mr. Chairman, I guess what my motion would be that we'd partially fund it for 75,000, and I know Mark is really good at finding other pots of money, and that might get them started, but I think that would be my motion if I got a second.
So that is the treasurer's motion. Is there support for the treasurer's motion?
Yeah, I'll second that one.
Okay, the secretary has seconded it. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays?
No.
And I'm a no, not for any other reason than the same.
That's fine. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right.
3-2, yeah.
Now we're on the Osage Improvement Service District, Lagoon Improvement. This is a request for $837,466. Is there anyone from Osage here? Anyone from Osage? Anyone from Osage? Mark, do you know anything about the project?
No, sir, we don't.
Okay. All right, Ms. Doring.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, our committee reviewed this project, and this project was already received a partial MRG grant for the exact same project at the June meeting. And so they were coming back to ask for the remaining funding that was funded as part of the partial funding at the previous meeting.
Okay.
And our committee still recommended no funding on this project.
All right. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, move director's rec.
Second.
It's been seconded. I'll give this one to the treasurer. He's slightly ahead of you, Superintendent. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, I missed, what's the motion?
The
Is
motion is the director's recommendation, which is no funding.
Okay,
All in favor?
Okay.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nays? Okay. Now we have the town of LaGrange, Public Works Facility for $500,000. Ms. Doring, do you want to touch this? Do you want to kind of give color to this, and then we have LaGrange here in force?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, our funding committee looked at this application, and there is already $982,192 of ARPA funding in this project. And we just determined at this board that at our funding committee recommendations that there was higher priorities. And so that was why our funding recommendation was no funding.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Tracy Pregno, the Public Works Director for the town of LaGrange, and I do have a council member, Kirk Hawes, with me, and our town secretary and clerk, Kathy Stoddard. We did send a letter out to all of you. I don't know if you received it or not. Had a chance to kind of review the process we've been through. I won't bore you with reading the letter, but it kind of stated where we started from in the ARPA project. And we originally came in, applied for ARPA funds. We downsized the project to less than $1 million, and from a 7,500 square foot building down to a 5,000 square foot building, with the assurance of our engineers with projects going on at the time, that project could have been completed. We were awarded the money. We kept our match the same in the project. As we move forward, we went ahead, designed, we bid the project. It came in at 2.1 million, which was well over what we had to spend at the time. We tried to work with that contractor that just to break the cost down. We decided to mutually go different directions and downside the project considerably. And we rebid it again in June of this last year, and it came in at 1.4, just shy of 1.5 million, which is still, you know, with engineering costs, we're still about $600,000 over what we had to spend. We then sat down with the Slib office and said, what are our options at this point, knowing we had to either commit the ARPA funds or give it back. We broke the project into phases, and we moved ahead with the assurance that, you know, there was some discussion at this level that the unobligated ARPA funds would be coming back our way, possibly to fund what your match was in the project. So we moved ahead, awarded the project. The base bid's still $100,000 more than we had to spend. The town committed to doing that, planning on getting some money back from ARPA and using some economic development money that we received as well. We were counting on $80,000. We got $6,000 back on the ARPA funds, which was kind of a shock to us, but it is what it is. We moved ahead, taking another 74,000 out of our reserves. But right now, where we're gonna be in this project is, we're gonna have a shell of a building. A nice metal $1 million building with no water, no sewer, no heat. The office, though, bathroom, none of that's finished. It's just a metal building when it's done. We're in the construction phase right now. We put a 60-day hold on the project because of the weather. And then this meeting fell right into the middle of that. So it kind of worked out, to kind of make a decision whether we move any farther into the project with the contractor. The nice thing is we do have all the costs locked in at this point. So if we decide to move forward, we're not gonna have cost. If we go back to the drawing board, don't get awarded the money, we're back to another 25% match coming back to the MRG, which is another 125,000 to finish the project at today's costs. Who knows what it'll be down the road. So we're just asking you guys to reconsider that. If you got questions here, I got these other two that can answer them. We did meet with some of the stuff was with Homeland Security came out. We did a study with them. Basically, we had another project going with them, but trying to get everything secure enough in one location to where that's a big concern of ours, just security. We're scattered across town, 2 different locations, an old building on one side, we got our equipment sent outside, but our SCADA system that runs the entire town is located in an office in the town hall that's open to anybody and everybody. And we were trying to get that located in the same building as where I was located. So anyways, I'll stand for questions, but if you have questions for anybody else, go ahead. So.
Right. Questions? Mr. Treasurer?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I did talk to council and asked them the question about if a building was not 100% completed for the intended use, whether or not it would be considered complete as far as the ARPA funding. And so I don't know, Mr. Peters was going to look at it. I'd like to know the answer to that, because I did ask him the question, well, if we had ARPA funding for a surgical center and you couldn't do surgeries in it, then no, that's not a completed building. We're trying to do a building where you have heat, water, all of those different things, so you can, jump in the fire engine and go to a fire. You can't do that if you're in a building that's 20 below zero.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Treasurer, I think for ARPA purposes, the program would require that the funds are spent for qualifying projects by that December 31, 2026. So I think we need to take a look at the grant agreement for the specific project that we granted to see what our funds were intended to be used for before we could make a determination at whether it would be complete or not. But for ARPA requirements, those funds would need to be expended by that December 31 date.
Yeah. To me, Mr. Chairman, we got the ARPA dollars out there, all the contracts and everything are in place, all the bids are in place. They valued engineered it down to the point where with all the added costs, they actually cut it substantially. If we don't move ahead in this area, and it's only 32% of Slib funding, the rest of it's from the local and different grants. So I think we're putting ourselves in a situation where it's untenable, about what may or may not happen with the ARPA funds. So, I'd hate to have them build a shell of a building and then find out, well, you didn't complete the project and you have to pay back the $1 million bucks. I just think that I know it's 500,000, but that just if it's 500,000, what was that? 6208. What was that number? 6.2. 6.2. Oh, 6.2. So if you went 6.7 million and divide that by the 24,000, where is that number? What's the math on that? Can you get that, or should I do it here?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Treasurer,
Yeah.
if you were to fund that at $500,000, you would be sitting as a board at $6,783,521,000, which is approximately 28% of the available funds that we came into this meeting to allocate for MRG funding for this biennium.
So essentially, we're like 3% over the 25% if we're splitting it out in 4 equal quarters. This early in the game, I think to the superintendent's point that, you know, it's a guideline, it's not hard and fast. I think going to 28% and removing all of the unintended consequences that might be associated with this project is a reasonable ask.
Is that a motion, sir?
I would move that we would approve $500,000 for the LaGrange Public Works facility at the, basically at the valued engineered reduced scope of the project.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm struggling on this one simply for the same reasons that I think the Grant Review Committee did, of just priority at this time, knowing that we have 4 other opportunities to reapply. And so I'll probably be a no for today, but if that's the case, I think we've got a lot more opportunities for bites at the apple. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, from my perspective, the reason we put a little bit more money into the front part of it is that we've got a longer construction period, and we do have a drop dead date on the ARPA funds when they have to be used. So the sooner that we can get into construction and know that it's going to be complete, I think the better.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Madam Auditor.
I would be a no vote on this if we didn't have ARPA money tangled up into it and a significant amount that LaGrange can't realistically pay back to the state.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, can you speak a little bit more to that then on the timelines? I mean, I know that we touched a little bit on it, but that would be helpful, I think, for me.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Kirk Hawes, I'm a town council member there. Yeah, the whole reason that we're even here is because of the ARPA funding at the beginning of this. That started our process, I believe it was in late, Tracy, help me with that, 2022? So that late 2022, we started this process and continued to work along that. And the ARPA is what actually triggered us to really push forward on this. And so as that progressed and things changed, there were some, I would tell you, it did feel like some of the rules changed along the way. And some of the, so we continually worked with that, and Tracy further discussed how we took the project and really pared it down quite a bit. This project, you know, so why is the community here? Well, this is a pool of funds that allows these small communities to take our meager cash that we have and leverage that to accomplish some of these great big infrastructure tasks. And we are updating a unit that is very old. I'm not going to call it dilapidated, but it's no longer serving the purpose. And so with that, one of the things I always look at when I'm sitting there trying to make decisions, I really want to be careful that as a small town, a community, that we aren't building some infrastructure that we can't even maintain with our normal funding mechanism. And I don't think we're here with that. In fact, it's probably going to go the other way. Our maintenance on this building for the next 40, 60 years would be significantly less than where we're at today. So, how we got here, ARPA left us in there. Sorry, I went on. Thank you.
No, I think that's fine. And you'll note that it's a point I made in my State of the State, is that some of these projects are almost fully completed and just need that extra mile. So I would concur with your comment that, you know, unfortunately, I think we are sort of heading back in small communities to where we were in the 1980s, and that's just the nature of the beast. So I guess without any further comment, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Mr. Secretary.
just wanted to say, I think I am going to vote for this as well because of the ARPA reasons, and we need to get that done, so thank you.
Thank you. And you are an aye.
Yeah, I'm an aye.
Yep, okay. Nays? I think that is carries. Thank you. We have three more projects, Memorial Hospital of Sheridan County, City of Kemmerer, Town of Bar None. We can continue to take these one at a time. And if that's the case, we will do the Memorial Hospital of Sheridan County, Central Sterile Equipment, $309,449. Is there anyone here from Sheridan? Anyone online from Sheridan? All right, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move Director's Rec.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. Superintendent, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, Director's Rec is passed. Number 6, City of Kemmerer, Design and Engineering for Walking Antelope Ridge Walking Trail, $25,000 is what was requested. Is there anyone here from the town of Kemmerer? Anyone from the town of Kemmerer? Hearing none, I would entertain a, oh, online, I'm sorry. Thank you. So we have a Trista Gordon. You should have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Bump. We, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you. Maybe your microphone has a mute. It appears you're okay through Zoom, but we cannot hear you. Mr. Bump, is there a possibility of a phone or?
Mr. Chairman, it's likely equipment on their end, and they can try calling the phone number in their email.
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to go over
Sure.
our decision while
Yeah.
we're waiting? So the board funding committee looked at this application, and we determined that it was a lower priority, and we also fully funded another City of Kemmerer project. And so that was the justification behind our recommendation of no funding.
Thank you, Mr. Ernie. Ms. Gordon, I will, we'll see if you can work it out with a phone call. We might move on to the town of Bar None, but we'll come back to you if you're able to get to us, if that works for you. Mr. Bump, I think she has, and then Mr. Bump will get you a phone number. Thank you. So the town of, let's move on to the town of Bar None, and we'll make sure that Trista, and we'll come back to Trista. So the town of Bar None, new fire apparatus, $362,500. You want to give us some color, Ms. Doring?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, at the point of our funding recommendation meeting, we actually held 2 meetings. Prior to that meeting, our office had reached out to the town of Bar None to get some additional information on their application and the new fire apparatus, at which point, prior to the funding meeting, we had not received any contact back. One of our funding partner I had also reached out and had received no calls back regarding their questions as well. So at that time, both at the first funding meeting we entertained as well as the second one a week later, we had heard no comments back from the town of Bar None. So at that point in time, we recommended no funding. Subsequent to those meetings, the town of Bar None did reach out to the Office of State Lands and had been unable or didn't realize that we were reaching out to ask additional questions, but that was the justification behind our no funding recommendation, is because we didn't get any follow-up to the questions, both by Office of State Lands and our funding partners.
Thank you. So, sir. And you'll have to push the button. It looks like a guy screaming or
There we
something
go.
there.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you for your time today. I'm
Yeah,
the
your
interim-
name,
Eugene Zahara, and I'm the interim fire chief for the town of Bar None. I was appointed in the middle of November to the end of November with some leadership changes in the fire department. So I do apologize for our tardiness on this matter. This project started in 2023 based on a industrial siting committee ruling as far as a project for Dino Solar. We were supposed to receive $450,000 in funding for this project based off of that project. However, that project has not started, and it doesn't look like it's going to start anywhere in the near future. So we were trying to figure out how we can raise additional funds to actually truly fund the project that was already ordered, and basically we're on the hook for at this time. I have reached out to Representative Alamand in regards to concerns about the siting committee and how funding is supposed to go, because it's basically we order stuff based off what the recommendation is from that committee. And then if the project doesn't go, the town is now on the hook for all that money. So it's a little concerning for small towns to continue moving forward. The apparatus that we're looking at replacing was initially just a type 1 apparatus, but looking at this scale, since I've actually taken a look at the project, I'm flying out to Minnesota next week to meet with Rosenbauer. We're going to take a look at see what we can do to scale back the project a little bit as far as cost goes, but however, maintain the needs of water carrying capability and firefighting capability of that apparatus as well. So I would like to be fiscally responsible to the town and any money that we receive. So I'm going to do my due diligence to make sure that moving forward that I do what I can to get the cost down. And I don't know if this is possible or not, but if that project ever does go forward and we start receiving payments, I would be more than happy, and the town would be more than happy to bring that money back to the Mineral Royalty Grant Program.
Thank you. And just a question I have, there's quite a bit of development going on north and west of Bar None and also across the way.
Yes.
Does the town respond to fire incidents there? Is that all county?
So the county has that's their immediate, but we have an automatic aid agreement with the county in certain response zones for all fires, whether it's vehicle, vegetation, or structure.
Okay, thank you.
And so this apparatus has a 2,000 gallon carrying capability currently. We're looking at increasing that to 2,500 gallons. So that way in the unhydrated areas within the county, we'll actually have water carrying capability and firefighting capability without the hydrant systems.
Thank you. Madam Auditor.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for coming down. As you sort of refine this request and try to make it as efficient as possible for both you and us, it is holding off till our June meeting going to be absolutely detrimental, or will that, where it looks like you're doing some research now, is that going to make a huge difference, or is the town able to?
I don't think it's going to make a huge difference at this point. Right now, the cab and chassis was supposed to be built by International. It's been a 2-year process. It finally just got line set 3 weeks ago. So Rosenbauer still hasn't even received the cab and chassis at this point, and so that's why I still have time to actually go to the plant and actually discuss rebuilding the body to make it more capable and user-friendly for us and the county, and even federal and state cooperators, because we do respond to state land fires as well. So I don't think that's at all a big ask for me. Like I said, I want to give you guys the best information, and I do appreciate you guys talking with me today. And like I said, the town council itself has already approved the 50%, as well as additional monies needed if there was any overages. At this point, my goal is to scale back and try to figure out how we can cut costs even more.
All right, thank you. Further questions? If there are none, I would entertain.
Mr. Chairman, I would move director's rec of 0 funding today, but of course with encouragement, and I'd like to see this back in June before us, and it sounds like you're working to refine it, and hopefully we can get it figured out then.
It's been moved and seconded by the superintendent, moved by the auditor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for coming down.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I appreciate your time today.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. We're gonna go back, and Mr. Bump, is Ms. Gordon been able to get on?
Mr. Chairman, I think so.
Hi there, can you hear me now in camera?
Yep, we can. Yep.
Okay, I apologize to the members of the board for that technical difficulty there. My name is Trista Gordon. I am Director of Events and Recreation for the City of Kemmer, and we are wanting to expand our current trail system with the growth that is forecasted for Kemmer, and looking at other funding options. All of those options require a plan and engineering to be done first, so we were hoping to get some help to get that done. We have some local partners with the cemetery district, as well as a couple community service groups that are willing to help do some of the hands-on labor to get this trail built once we have it designed. I would be open to any questions.
Thank you for your patience and persistence. Are there questions for Ms. Gordon? Are there questions? And Ms. Doring.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, our funding committee reviewed the City of Kemmer's application for trails, and we determined that it was a lower priority and that we had already fully funded another City of Kemmer application for the police vehicles.
Yep. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question, which is probably a dumb one since I'm not new here. I'm not sure I was aware that this pot of money that trails was a valid use for that.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Auditor, all applications were reviewed by the AG's office for eligibility. We can defer to them as their review related to this.
Oh, okay.
Members of the board, Madam Auditor, within the board's rules under Chapter 3, this pot of money is specifically designated for essential public services, emergency situations, things of that nature. The statute that guides this chapter, Chapter 3, defines essential public services quite broad. It's certainly not for us to say whether trails or something of this nature would qualify as an essential public service. This is much more a question for the board, but that's where the statute and the rules lie.
Very good. Thank you. Any, do you still have your mic going?
I'm just ready for a motion.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move director's recommendation on this item. I just don't feel that it meets the essential services definition that we need here.
Been moved by the superintendent.
Second.
It's been seconded by the auditor. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Ms. Gordon, thank you very, very much for being here. And I think it sounds like a worthy project. We'll see how the vote goes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nays? The director's recommendation carries. Ms. Gordon will try to find another avenue to be able to help fund the project. Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those are all the MRG applications for your consideration today. We just like to highlight that the next round coming up in June for the board's consideration, those applications are due on February 20th. So everybody out there listening, make sure you're working on that in advance of that meeting.
Thank you. There's been a request to move a couple of the investment matters and the Board of Deposits up because bills are coming up.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make one comment.
Oh, sure, Mr. Secretary.
One suggestion for the future, I understand that, maybe there's smaller projects on the initial end that have gotten full recommendations, but I really think, and I've said this a couple times, we should go through all of the testimony beyond maybe that on the front end when you have a cap, because I just think that it helps in trying to weigh the different things when you hear from everybody. And what this is going to lead to is people that are in first are going to have a huge advantage. So I really think we should go through all the testimony and then discuss it. But happy to talk to the chairman more about that. And I understand these are great projects and people are excited to make motions, but I really think in the future when we're starting this for the first time in a the last biennium, we just did non-emergent ones in one meeting. And I just really think beyond maybe the initial motion, we should go through everybody.
Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just one point I want to make, rather than excitement for motions, it's really about homework done ahead of time, reading the applications and reaching out with questions. So we'll just add that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's always been a matter of opinion, but.
So the request has been to move the Board of Deposits and the investment performance update, I believe, Mr. Treasurer, up. And that would leave us with what items afterwards?
Mr. Chairman, after that, it would just be Board Matter I3.
So without objection, I would move to the J matters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And looking at J1, this is our quarterly board matter on the Board of Deposits, where we set the rates of interest that the banks are required to pay to the state for funds enrolled in the Time Deposit Open Account TDOA program. Mr. Chairman, we recommend an interest rate of 4.4%, which is the average monthly yield on one-year Treasury bills for the prior full calendar quarter. That's the same methodology that we've always used, and if you look at that, we on the page after that, it's got the daily rates and the average down at the bottom on that on a one-year Treasury. So, Mr. Chairman, the recommendation, if there's the motion, would be that the State Treasurer requests the board accept his recommendation of the TDOA rate to be established using the one-year Treasury average yield for the full calendar quarter preceding this meeting, October 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2024. The rate of 4.4% will be the fourth quarter of the TDOA contract year for year 2024 through 2025 to be effective April 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2025.
You've heard the motion of the treasurer. Is there support for the motion? It's been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The second J2 matter is a review of the collateral report on a quarterly basis, congruently with the TDOA program. We give a summary of the banks and the bank deposits. The highlights of this is that of the 42 banks, 2/3 of them participate, while 1/3 do not participate. Everybody that is participating has a positive credit balance. The total collateral offered is $418,630,992, and the amount that has been offered to deposit or requested for deposit is $206,682,875.15. And one of the things that I want to bring to attention to everybody is that every year we have a yearly letter that goes out. It's basically an attestation letter of business practices. And so I want to give I guess, a 5-point thing that I know will be included in the letter. Is that we're going to survey the loan practices and business goals to determine the banking capacities for Wyoming's basically communities. We're also going to ask questions about debanking or a change in the business practices and the capacity on a community basis and on onboarding additional borrowing opportunities. And the fourth one is that we're gonna inquire about the HR practices as if they're merit and performance based. And then we're also gonna have a question for the local bank boards about the fiduciary practices or their thoughts on being a fiduciary and what it means to them. So that'll give us, I think, a good opportunity to know some information that we haven't had before, and that's really kind of determine, every one of our communities, I guess, represented across all of the different industries that are within their communities, and whether there's any holes in our basically in our community banking, in our banking program. So I think we're asking for a little bit more data. The first time we sent this out, we didn't get, I would say, a very good participation rate, especially on the folks that don't participate in the TDA program. But I think we're trying to look at the health of our banking system here and the opportunities of getting a loan, and if you're in an industry in Wyoming in your community. So I know there's a lot of banks from time to time have changed what their capacities used to be. We used to have a lot more agricultural banking than we did, I think, 30 years ago. And those things kind of go in cycles as far as the health of the agricultural community and that industry. It's the same thing happens, I think, from time to time in other industries, including energy. But we're going to try to get a kind of a 3-year look back and see if we can get some information that we might be able to share, and see if there's any place where we need to actually, I guess, find a problem. We're not necessarily working for problems. We're looking for any solutions in regards to our banking industry. And I'm going to try to work as closely as I can with the banking industry, with Scott Meyer, their representative, and hopefully we'll get some a good outcome about and we'll get an A+ rating on everything in Wyoming in every community. But I don't think that'll probably be the answer. We'll probably come up with some questions and some ideas and a little food for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. It's an information-only item, and I think we'll move on to K1. Okay. And I'll note it's tax season, so K1s are always exciting then.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Great to be here in Cheyenne with you. I've got 2 items today. One is just a preliminary look at the December 31st portfolios and performance. And then the second will be going back in time a little bit. Once a year, we look at the fiscal year end allocations and performance and compare the Wyoming permanent funds to a peer group of other U.S. state level permanent funds. So those are the 2 primary things. I'll start on page 4 and I'll focus your attention on the middle of the page. There's a column that says calendar year to date as of 12/24. And that just, each color in that colorful chart represents an asset category. And you can see as you look across time, just ranking each year from top to bottom, best performer to worst performer. And one thing that stands out about 2024 is it looked a lot like 2023. Under the surface, there was some different market dynamics, but the top 2 performers were once again US large cap equities led largely by some of the largest tech companies, and midstream energy companies as represented by the MLP. And so you have the benefit of both of those exposures in your portfolio. Real estate was the worst performer 2 years in a row, and bonds were near the bottom. Again, you can see we had about a 5.5% return last year. This year we only had about a 1% return, and that's because we saw some movement up in the longer end of the yield curve. So we did earn a healthy coupon, but we saw some price get back on the bond portfolio as rates moved up. Generally speaking, the economy appears to be in pretty healthy shape. Inflation and unemployment numbers have been pretty stable. The Fed did, at their December meeting, in the commentary, even though they reduced rates, they did signal that they were likely to be slowing the pace of monetary policy easing. And so that did cause a little bit of market concern and a little bit of sell-off in both stocks and bonds towards the end of the year as yields moved higher and the market sort of started to price in fewer interest rate cuts next year. If we move to page 5, you can see the total portfolio across all of these pools of assets at the end of the year stood just over $30 billion. And so just, I'm not sure if I've presented a number to this board that started with 30 before. I remember a long time ago when it was $3 billion, but you've seen really tremendous growth in these portfolios over the years.
That was like 2002.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Total fund performance at the top of page 6, and again, this is a roll-up of all of the underlying funds, which all have very different purposes, so we won't try to make too much sense of the level. But what does matter on this page is just the degree of relative performance against the benchmark. And this is a roll-up of all of the underlying fund benchmarks. But fiscal year to date, so that's now the first half of this current fiscal year, actually a little bit behind by 20 basis points. But for the full year, some pretty healthy outperformance, 70 basis points net of fees. And particularly strong over the last 3 years, almost a full % net of fees, and well above the benchmark over all longer time periods. Diving into the specific fund level performance, that starts on page 9. Good fiscal year to date performance for Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, up just about 4% for the first half of this fiscal year. That brought you to about just over 10% for the full year of 2024, and really strong outperformance here, over 1.5% net of fees last year for the PMTF. Common School Permanent Land Fund has nearly identical returns over that same time period. The allocations of these two funds are still a bit different, but as you know, they are over time gradually moving towards each other. The big difference being with Common School Permanent Land Fund, there's more to do to get the private markets exposure in line with PMTF. Workers' Compensation Fund, the move up in rates did mean negative returns for the liability hedging portion of that portfolio. You can see down 1.4% last year. But again, keep in mind that is also tracking approximately what's happening with the value of the liabilities, projected liabilities of that system.
And Josh, how is that doing? Because, the return on it is not the factor that we looked at.
Yeah, it's really more the relative return against the liabilities of the system, and you can get a decent sense of that. It's probably not perfect, but if you just look at the Workers' Compensation Fund total return of 3.5%, and then look at the liability hedging index, which was minus 1.7, the spread between those two should approximate, at least for investment portfolio, the spread was positive by almost about 5% last year.
Yeah.
Okay. If we move to LISRA at the top of page 10, LISRA saw about a 7% return last year. The biggest piece of that was the long-term reserve, which was up 16% last year. Just under 9% for Pool A at 8.6, and state agency pool at 4.3%. So a good year. You know, we're probably facing a little bit more uncertainty around the impact of policies, economic policies, trade policies from the new administration. But what exactly those policies will be, I don't think anybody really knows yet. So we do like that your portfolio is particularly well diversified in the face of uncertainty. That's typically your best friend. That's it for the December performance. Before I move to the peer study, I'll take a pause and see if there's any questions.
Are there any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Okay. Thanks.
Great. So if we go to page 48, so pretty deep into this presentation. And again, this is taking a step back to June 30th of last year. You know, it takes a while for us to get all of the private market values. So once a year, we do want to take a step back and really kind of look at your sort of all-in performance and how that compares to peers. Page 48 just gives you a sense of what's in this peer group. These are 14 funds, all state level permanent funds, all funded by natural resources, and all with a similar long-term objective of creating intergenerational equity from these assets. And then you can see the size. They're just lined up from largest to smallest across the bottom of the page, with Alaska Permanent Fund being the largest, Texas Permanent School Fund the second, the New Mexico Land Grant Permanent Fund, that's their school fund, and then Wyoming Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, the fourth largest. Several states do have two funds. You can see New Mexico and North Dakota. You also see both a severance tax fund and a land grant school fund. Asset allocation.
And just a couple of comments on this, and Treasurer, correct me if I'm wrong. First off, the Alaska Permanent is not a kind of a sovereign wealth fund as much as, I mean, it is sort of, but its objectives are very different, much more along the lines of what you're proposing. But it's been in play for a very long time and had very aggressive management for a very long time. So it's just sort of overwhelming.
Yeah, their rainy day fund is about the size of our permanent mineral trust fund.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And then they also have another fund there too. Texas, that one also a lot longer history. Really what I come down to is a point that the good treasurer used to make to now our junior senator on a regular basis. Over the last 4 years, New Mexico has benefited because they had a fairly clear track to being able to develop their minerals, whereas Wyoming was held back.
They're getting over $4 billion a year from Permian.
Now, there's some of that is because Permian's easier to develop and lower list costs, but some of it's just because the Biden administration said that's a Democrat crew.
No, he wouldn't do that, would he?
So I wanted to make that observation, because when you look at the relative size of these things, there's some history there. And my point is, I think Wyoming and North Dakota's come some distance, but that doesn't have federal land either. And that, I think that tells you what this administration, this past administration that we've endured, has done to hold us back. So it's a compliment to you and your staff, Mr. Treasurer, that you are doing as well as you are.
And Mr. Chairman, and a lot of that is that as we go into private, so it's give you that illiquidity premium, where it takes a lot of years to put those in, because you don't want to put everything in 1 year, so it takes you 4, 5, 6 years to actually get in. And if you look at, to your point, if you look at Alaska and look at their webpage, they've got, I don't know, probably 40 or 50 more, I guess, privates than we do. You know, I mean, they've got a list, I mean, page after page of different private equity and private credit firms. So they've got a tremendous amount of diversity. We're working on that, and it just takes time. And that's exactly what, as to your point, the Common School Fund, you can see that it's not quite up to the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, but you can see that it's moving to where at some point in time they'll be exactly the same on the total return basis.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you. On page 50, this actually gets at the allocation differences across the funds. They're lined up from left to right on a pretty simple view of risk exposure in the portfolio, just by looking at the portfolio on the farthest left. That's the North Dakota State Land Board. That's their school fund. Smallest exposure to traditional fixed income and cash. To the far right, Montana has the highest exposure to fixed income and cash, and that's because the Montana Constitution doesn't allow these funds to invest in equities, similar to Wyoming back in the mid-90s when equities were first allowed. And that really kind of highlights what tends to drive the allocation differences across these funds is where they're at in terms of the Constitution and statutory limits that restrict investment for the funds. You can see right in the middle of the page, the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. You've built a very diversified portfolio, and it's really fairly similar to several of the peers here. You can see the Texas Permanent School Fund just to the left, and the New Mexico funds just to the right of that. And to the treasurer's comment, the Alaska Fund, one thing that stands out over there on the left is, you're right, a much longer history and larger commitment to private equity investing. They've got an 18% allocation to private equity. You have come a long ways towards that, especially in the last couple of years, and the PMTF today is right at about 11% private equity. Just a note on trends that we've seen in asset allocation. We've got 3 different data points, 2024, and then 3-year intervals before that, 2018, 2021. You know, the big shift from 2018 to 2021 was a reduction in fixed income in favor of other alternatives. Looking at the last 3 years, the bigger shift we're seeing is actually a reduction in public equities. I think some of what may be driving that and we'll be working on asset allocation. In fact, we're meeting for a full day with the IFC in early March here in Cheyenne, and then presenting the updated asset allocation study to this board, I believe in April. But one of the things that we're seeing as we're doing asset allocation studies with these funds is, equities have done extremely well, but especially certain pockets have become quite expensive. And the more expensive an asset is, the lower probability or just the harder it is for that asset to deliver that same level of good return going forward. And so that'll probably be one of the major themes of asset allocation work this year is, what do those equity risk premiums really look like at today's pricing? Although I wouldn't expect for a long-term fund that there's likely to be major changes, but that'll probably be directionally one of the themes we're seeing.
Josh, one quick question, and Mr. Treasurer, apologies for this, but I know former Governor Burgum and I talked a lot about hedging.
Yeah.
Are you aware, and then, North Dakota has not done that to my knowledge, but are you aware of any of like Alaska or any of these sort of commodity-driven funds looking at hedging at all? And I don't know, Mr. Treasurer, if you've talked about that or thought about that too.
Actually, Patrick was looking at doing something through Grosvenor, and Grosvenor was a little slow getting back to him, and it eventually cost us about $10 million on a position that we could have put on that we could have gone through Grosvenor. And so we're going to have some enlightenment in our discussions with these guys that when when our CIO says that they want to look at something, explore it, we expect a little bit better service than, 45 days and being a day late and $10 million short.
And the reason I ask, I don't think we have to have a robust conversation here, but I think it's worthwhile talking about just from commodity exposure. It's a topic we brought up, I don't know, probably 7 years ago. I think you were at that conversation, treasurer, before you were treasurer. And I think, that might be something that could be laid at the IFC. I'm just, it's a question.
Mr. Chairman, it's an excellent question. I've had the good pleasure of working with Governor Burgum on similar funds in North Dakota, so I've had this conversation with him as well. They have not implemented anything. We have studied it, and I think I think it's a very good conversation to be having, given the significance of the contributions to these funds, and would love to explore that conversation further.
Fantastic.
Yeah, no other U.S. state funds, I believe, are doing anything. A lot have looked at it but struggled to actually implement anything. Mexico is one sovereign entity that does have a long history of doing that.
And Mr. Chairman, you're probably more aware of the industry where they actually, hedge futures, so returns, so they can actually, get financing, and I think that, if we can, understand what industry is doing and not jump in with both feet, but both feet, but I think that we need to really look at it, and that's probably the best practice that follow what business is doing.
Well, and that's my thought, 2016, we saw a crash.
Yeah.
And everything kind of went south.
Right.
And I think if we'd had a good position on that, we could have softened that blow a little bit.
And I think the discussion back then says, well, we're $100 oil now, it might go to 200.
Yeah.
But 60 probably would have funded the state very, very well.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Last page I'll point you to, and really just thrilled to present these numbers to you because you've seen such an improvement over the years in Wyoming's relative positioning here. So first of all, for the one-year returns, you were both funds near the top of the peer group last year. The three funds that had the best performance over that period are the three funds that really have avoided alternatives and have a pretty healthy exposure just to public equities. So they benefited the most from the larger public equity exposure. But 3 years really, a lot of great work in terms of the asset allocation decisions that this board has made, but also the execution by the Treasurer's Office investment staff. PMTF is actually the top performing fund over the past 3 years at 5.3%, with the median of these funds coming in right at about 4%. And you've seen, along with that, marked improvement in both the 5 and 10 year numbers as well.
Fantastic. Good work.
Concludes my report, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer any final questions.
Any other questions? Any questions? Josh, always good to see you. Thank you.
Great to see you as well. Thank you.
Interim Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last matter on your agenda is item I3. It is a capital construction loan to the city or Cheyenne Regional Airport for $481,354. It's a loan term of 10 years. It's expected to finance the Department of Family Services renovation phases 2 and 3. It is 100% of the total project costs. The director's recommendation on this project is to waive the application deadline for the capital construction loans submitted by the Cheyenne Regional Airport and approve the board's capital construction loan request in amount up to $481,354 for a 10-year term for the Department of Family Services renovation phases 2 and 3 projects as described. The interest rate for the loan shall be the higher of 3% or the yield on a 10-year U.S. Treasury bond rounded to 2 decimals. The estimated rate at the date of loan closing is expected to be 4.62%. For further detail about this application, I could turn it over to Ms. Doering. I also know that Director Schmidt's in
I
the
see
office and
Director
and she
Schmidt
could
back
answer
there.
some questions too.
Ms. Doring.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this application was reviewed by our office. As the interim director said, the total project requested cost is $481,354, which is 100% of the cost of the Phase 2, Phase 3 renovations. Any unexpected costs or additional funding, if necessary, will be funded by the airport's reserve board. The airport has pledged the lease revenue from the Department of Administration and Information through the Department of Family Service. A financial analysis was prepared using the financial information from 2022 to 2024, and based on this information, it appears the airport has the ability to repay the requested loan. Therefore, the staff is recommending the approval of the loan as at the identified amount. This loan application was also reviewed by our Attorney General's office to determine if the requested loan would exceed the statutory debt limit, and it did not. And also, should this loan be approved, the legality of the transaction will be certified as required by statute when the loan documents and terms are reviewed and approved by the Attorney General's office. With that, I'll stand for any additional questions.
Thank you. Are there questions? Are there questions? Mr. Secretary, question?
I'm just trying to understand the structure of this. So, we're going to lend them the money with one hand, and then they're going to pay us back with the. I mean, it just seems like a big circle. You know, I'm not understanding why we wouldn't just set that up in the contract or something. Why are we doing this in the board and another program rather than just putting it in the A&I contract and working it through that negotiation? I don't know why we've got this side thing going on. It's very odd to me.
Mr. Coleman or Director Schmidt, or do you want to give any color to that? There is method to the madness.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Director Schmidt, good to have you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Corin Schmidt. I'm the Director of the Department of Family Services. And Mr. Secretary, to your point, yes, this is a little bit of a circular conversation because of how we are able to access leased property. So to go back a little bit, we were at a point of eviction from our local office and had to desperately find a relocation for our Cheyenne office, which is our largest office. We engaged through A&I. A&I is the leaser. We engaged through them a lease with the Cheyenne Airport Authority, and with the recognition that we would have to remodel that building to some extent after we moved in. It currently does not allow for very public space, and so because of the rush of having to enter into that agreement, we understood that we were going to have to request some funds later. We did an analysis about wrapping it into a long-term lease, but I think what we found is that this would be a less expensive way to be able to do the remodel rather than going through an extended lease with an interest rate. And I think that's accurate, Mr. Coleman? Okay. So that is a little bit as to why this was just a cheaper way to do it.
Does that answer your question, Secretary?
Sort of. I think, you know, if it's less expensive, I guess I'm all in. It's weird, Mr. Chairman, in my opinion, but.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, to add to that, thank you. We are also able to use federal funds by doing it this way as well.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, that starts to explain it a little more.
All right. Are there further questions? If there aren't, I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve the director's recommendation as presented.
It's been seconded by the treasurer. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nays? Motion carries. Thank you. Interim Director.
Mr. Chairman, that is everything we have for the State Loan and Investment Board today.
Will be adjourned.
Been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
I was gonna
We get
say.
really excited.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Chairman, thanks for getting us up.